Robert, thank you so much for joining me on the You're Not Alone podcast today. Ever since our phone call, I've been super excited for this one. I mean, we literally blocked out whatever it is, 2.5, 3 hours of time just because we knew that this was going to be a longer one. Not saying we're going to use the whole time. We'll see what happens. But just in my conversation with you, I sort of realized that your story is a long, windy road to where you are today. But when we spoke on the phone, you were very open and honest about your struggles with alcohol, and that the man that I have on the podcast today is, I mean, I'm sure in a lot of ways, the same person at your core, but very different in a lot of other ways from who you were back then. And I just found your story very inspiring, and I think that a lot of other people could relate to it. And so I wanted to bring you on to share with my audience. And when we were talking, I just felt that starting this off from the jump, chronological order, made the most sense. So can you sort of take us back to Robert as, I don't know if you want to go back to like the elementary school years, the teenage years, but can you just sort of take us back to earlier Robert, younger Robert, and kind of let us into your world as to where you were at that time in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to say thanks for having me on. And I enjoyed our conversation the other day. And I think that, what you're doing here is really awesome, and sharing your experience, with other people and trying to help out. It's amazing, man. So
I appreciate that.
Really cool stuff. Yeah. Wow. Where to begin? I guess, I don't know. Growing up, I was always like, super happy kid, and always, involved in sports, and, I always loved sports and physical activity and all that stuff. And I guess like kind of jumping to like where I started to kind of feel like different, I guess, or, when I started to have some struggles was probably, in high school. In high school, I felt like I didn't really like fit in, and I kind of just always felt like kind of less than. And I think one of the biggest characteristics I had, like kind of starting with that time and then kind of like progressing like on through college and all that stuff, was always like feeling like things weren't fair.
Yeah.
Like I would have, certain situations in my life, whether it be like, I was living with my mother, and, she was raising us as a single parent. And I grew up in a really affluent area, up in Danville, California. And our lifestyle wasn't like that. Like I wouldn't say like, I was missing any meals, or, my mom loved me very much, and she did a great job raising myself and my sister, and I had a good life, but it was different than kind of everybody else in that area. And I didn't do like super great in school. And so I always kind of just felt different and like kind of less than, but in this interesting way where it was like, dude, I had so many things, like I had family that loved me, and, I never had to really worry about a ton. And I think like the biggest way that it came out was like, if people would find success in things, or somebody would like accomplish something, and, I would always like make it about me in this way of like, I wish I could do that. Or, I found myself like looking back, like never really being able to like truly be like happy for somebody, for like accomplishing things. And so, I didn't realize it at the time, but I just had this like kind of like distorted like view on things, and kind of like selfish in a way. And I think that like, that mindset was really unhealthy for me, and, was a big reason why, I did feel less than, and I did feel like, I didn't really fit in with people, or I wasn't good enough. And so anyways, you know, like in high school, kind of started drinking, probably actually might've been like slightly before that, like 12 or 13, started drinking, you know, and it kind of like slowly progressed, and it all felt normal to me because I had like a group of friends, and, you know, like we would go to like high school dances, and we would like, you know, hide a bunch of vodka in like a water bottle, you know, and bring it in, and we would like, yeah, we would just like chug it, you know, like not even like sipping on it, but we would just like chug this vodka.
Oh yeah, that was my friend group. That was us in high school too. The classic sneaking the water bottles of vodka down into the party, and like the way you could tell it was vodka, I think, is if you shook it and it
would foam up.
It would foam up versus like a regular water bottle. That was like one of the jokes, is like you had to like shake the water bottle to make sure it was either water or vodka.
Yeah, for sure. And that's awesome. You did that too.
Oh yeah. Well, because I was even curious, like, did you, when you started drinking, was it something that like you sought out actively, or was it just like somebody in the friend group was like, hey, I've got this vodka, like, you want to try it out? Like, how did it, for me, I feel like I came to it very innocently. I distinctly remember it. It was the summer between 8th grade and freshman year of high school. And I showed up to a party, and somebody handed me a water bottle and was like, drink this. And I was like, what is it? And they were like, and then they handed me like, you know, like the soda, like classic, like the Chaser.
Yeah.
Like I remember exactly, I'm not going to air out names or anything, but I remember exactly what basement I was in, exactly when it happened, like all of it, because it was literally the first time I ever got drunk.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I remember, I do remember the first time, and I think we drank like peach schnapps or something. But it was like, I think it was 3 of us, and it was kind of like a decision that we made, you know, together. So I don't know, like I don't know that I was necessarily like looking for an escape at that time, but I think like we just, you know, I don't know, like wanted to try it out, or like kind of wanted to be rebellious a little bit. So
yeah,
we hit my friend's parents' liquor cabinet and had some of that.
Raided the cabinet.
Yeah.
Classic.
And I think that experience, like I felt it a little bit, but like, you know, it wasn't really like a full on, you know, like getting drunk or really fully feeling the effects of the alcohol. And then I think like the first couple like major times, I did have a friend, you know, in high school, and his brother was like a couple years older than us. And like, they were kind of like, my friend's brother was kind of like, you know, the bad kid crew. And so they were always like drinking at the house. And so once we had like tried it a couple times, then we started like kind of drinking with them. And that was like dry gin, and we were like taking shots and stuff.
So rough. Dry gin shots that's so brutal. Gnarly. But yeah, I mean, I had a friend like that too, who like his older brother, his friends would like supply us with booze, and like sometimes we would drink with them and stuff. So like I can picture it now. Like that was a big part of my high school experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like at that time, it was kind of like, you know, I kind of looked up to like my friend's brother. Probably not like the best person to look up to at that time. You know, actually him and I'm still friends with them today. They just came down recently and we played some golf, and, you know, it's interesting how far everybody's come since then. But,
oh yeah.
But yeah, I think it was like kind of like partially wanting to fit in, like partially wanting to like be cool, you know? But yeah, it was always like, you know, looking back, it was always kind of crazy. Like, cause then after that, it would be like my friends would get together and we would like take shots in the bathroom, and we would like tally how many shots we were taking. Like it was a competition, you know? And so I don't know, like definitely, like drinking was just like always like that, you know, whether it be like a competition or just like, you know, drinking to get like obliterated, like every time, you know? and it felt normal to me. And then kind of like later on in high school, same thing, just like getting completely just torched. I remember one time, fast forward a little bit. I think it was like senior ball. And, we like did the pre-party and we were drinking, and then, went back to my friend's house, and I just got like completely blacked out. And I guess I passed out like in the hot tub.
Yep.
And so I didn't like remember anything. And then everybody was like telling me about it the next day. And there was like pictures of me, and I'm like in my boxers, because I went in the hot tub in my boxers, and I'm just like up against the toilet like this.
Yep.
And actually, interestingly enough, like that's what got me into fitness at that time.
How old were you at this time?
I was 18 years old.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I'd always played sports. I was always super active. And then, I tried to play basketball in high school. It didn't really like work out. I had like an opportunity to like be on the varsity team my senior year, but like the coach was basically like, you're never really going to play. And so I was like, oh, I'd rather just like, get drunk all the time.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Didn't have to like go to practice and grind and like not get any playing time whatsoever.
Yep.
So, oh man, where was I going with that?
I think it's the build up to when things started to like shift for you, right? Where it went from being fun to something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So then anyways, I was like, super active, and like, but then my priorities changed, and it was like, okay, I just want to like be in the cool crew. I want to like party all the time, get drunk all the time. And then, we had that senior ball experience. And so I had gotten like out of shape a little bit,
Yep.
And it wasn't like extreme, but I remember like looking at this picture of me, passed out by the toilet, and just kind of like looking at my body. And I was just like, I'm 18 years old, but I remember looking at it and I was like, man, I do not look like somebody that, cares about their body, or cares about their health. And I had actually been working at a 24-hour fitness up in San Ramon at the time, at the front desk. And then that was when I was kind of like, okay, I want to start like really getting dialed in with working out, and I want to, potentially like see where that goes. And so I started, I was at the 24, and I met this guy, Matt Hendershot, and he was a trainer at the 24. And he was just such a nice guy. And like, I don't know, he's like super cool. And like, I just was like, dude, I want to be like this guy, And he was like super generous, and he would just like, personal training's expensive, and I'm like 18, I'm working like front desk job at a gym. And so he kind of like guided me and like allowed me to work out with him. And so he kind of like, started showing me the ropes and stuff. And I finally got serious about working out. And I like fell in love with it, like kind of seeing like, starting from like one point, I think the first one for me was like, starting off with like dumbbell chest press or something. And I was doing like, 15s, when I first started. And then, pretty shortly after like being really consistent about it, I would kind of like follow his lead with like what he would do for his eating, and like setting goals and targets, and then being consistent with the exercise, and then I, started doing like 40s on the chest press, and I was like stoked, So yeah, this guy like really kind of just like took me under his wing, and we became close friends. And that's when I decided, okay, like I want to like, get into personal training. So I ended up like getting certified and starting as a trainer at this 24. But I was like, it was like I had found like my passion and like my love and like what I wanted to do. but I was still lost,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Tell me more about that. How were you lost?
Yeah, I just had that same like mentality that I was talking about before, and I hadn't really like found myself yet, and I still don't know if today, like in this moment, if I exactly know, like, who I am. Like, I feel like I'm always learning, about myself and life and everything, so, but
Yeah.
I had like no idea,
Yep.
like who do I really want to be? Like, who do I want to show up as?
Yeah.
Like, how do I want to treat other people? Like, how do I want to make an impact? I had no idea. I was just kind of like making it just by and making it work as I went. And so, I was still like, I was training, and then we would have like work parties and stuff. And I just had like the same tendency of just like getting absolutely just destroyed, all the time. And
yep.
Yeah, it really like affected me, negatively, and like took a lot of my, attention, away from like the things that like I enjoyed doing. So I don't know. I kind of like made it work, as a personal trainer for a little bit.
So when you were personal training, were you drinking? Were you drinking every day after work and just getting obliterated? Was it just was it at social gatherings taking place like a couple times a week? Were you drinking like before the gym, at the gym? I guess help paint that picture for me. What did that look like?
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of trying to like, remember everything, but it's hard when you're drunk all the time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's funny. Yeah.
I think so. I kind of had that phase where I was like, okay, I want to get into fitness, like obviously, like, look at me, like I'm not healthy, like I need to make a change. And so I felt like I was like pretty consistent for a while. I was still young though. And so I was like figuring it out. And so I was like pretty consistent about like being healthy for a while, but I would still like, that was probably at that time was kind of like it toned back a little bit to more just like weekends, so I guess I was like more of a weekend drinker, but like when I would drink to excess and like have no control after the first drink.
Yeah.
It's like, I was never having like one beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, it was just like,
once it started, it was a waterfall.
Yeah. Just no control. So, I think like that was pretty consistent for a while. And then, this was probably up until like 25, 26, drinking like this. And then, I kind of matured and saw some success with work, and, kind of got into like a nice place that I was living in. And I guess shortly before that, sorry to backtrack.
That's okay.
I got into, so I had shingles actually. I was like, I think I was 20, 27. I had shingles, and it's kind of like a funny story where I was like in Vegas for an ex-girlfriend's birthday, and
yep.
I had this thing, and I had this like misdiagnosis or whatever, and eventually I came back home, and I went to the doctor there, and he was like, "Oh, you have shingles," and so this guy like prescribed me a bunch of Norcos for it.
Yep.
And so, I started taking the Norcos, and it was like helpful for the symptoms. And then during that time when I was like taking the medication, my buddies would be like, "Hey, do you have any, or can I get some of those Norcos?"
Is that a painkiller?
Yeah. So it's basically, it's like hydrocodone.
Okay.
So it's like Vicodin, but I think it's like double the dose.
Oh, wow. So it's the strong stuff. Okay.
It's the good, well, almost the good stuff, but
yeah.
So I kind of didn't really know that like my friends were like taking them recreationally.
Yep.
So I would like, I gave some to my friends, and I think I had like 60, and then I had a refill.
Yep.
So I got the refill, and I was like giving some to some friends. And, once I ran out of those, then I started like, now I'm like, oh, well, I like these, they feel good when I take them.
Yep.
Like I want more of them. And so I started like asking my friends if they had some. And so then once I started getting into, pills, it was like my drinking slowed down. And for a while I was like more productive at work and kind of like saw more success, because I wasn't like, I don't know. I think like a lot of the like fear, anxiety, worry, feelings of not feeling good enough, like a lot of that was like kind of subsided. And I kind of felt like, I guess, more at peace, in general, and kind of more confident, and I felt like my drinking wasn't like, affecting me as much. I would recover better over the weekends. I was more productive. Like things just felt like a little bit more put together. And so then, my patterns were like, going out with my buddies, and we would go like get a couple IPAs, 2 or 3 nights a week. And we'd take like a half a Norco, have a couple beers.
Yep.
Or like, smoke some weed too. And like, we'd call it the trifecta.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just the perfect blend.
The perfect blend, and I kind of found like with the pills too, it was like, if there was an event and I went out and, got like super wasted, the next morning, it's like take a couple pills, and your hangover completely goes away.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess like every time like some sort of drug or something is like introduced to my life, it's like it has some relief for a while, Yeah. And it almost felt like at the time like it kind of helped.
Yeah.
And it kind of like works until it doesn't, and then you find something new. So yeah, that lasted for a while, and then it turned into, and it was just progressive. Like it turned into, I was driving up to Sacramento, like, once a week, twice a week, picking up like 60 pills, and then driving back down, selling them to friends, and then it became like an every night thing,
Yeah.
So I'm taking these things.
The Narcos or
the Norcos.
Norcos. Yeah. Taking the Norcos. Those I was like that doesn't sound right. That's a word, but it means something different related to this topic. So the Norcos,
totally,
I've never heard that. I've never heard of Norcos before. I took Vicodin when I was in high school after a surgery. And I can attest to the fact that they do, when you're on them, you're not worried about too much. I mean, but I guess that's going to be the part of the story that you talk about where you're talking about the introduction of the different substances. They bring some temporary relief in the moment, but then it's once they start to become a part of your life. And I think you were getting ready to say that. So you were starting to take these, it sounds like you were getting ready to say like every night type of situation, or?
Yeah. So I was taking them every night, and then it would turn into, I was, like I said, I was like pretty successful with my training business at this time. And then I would start taking them like right when I got off work, and then it would be like, I would bring one into work, and then like during my last session of the day, like right before,
yep,
I would take one then. So it was kind of like, as soon as I get off, like I'm, pretty high.
Yep.
And it just progressed, man. And then I started like doing it, more throughout the day. I would like go home on my break and like play video games, and I would like, pop a couple Norcos and then go back to work, and then it turned into, taking oxys, which is, it's essentially like they're both opiates. It's like a little bit stronger. And kind of, I think the biggest difference is that there's like no Tylenol in it, so you can take more of it without getting like sick from, taking too much Tylenol.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And then you can do it, like you can do it more ways because there's no Tylenol in it. So it's like you can snort it, you can smoke it.
Were you doing all the different options that were available? Like snorting it, smoking it, just ingesting it by swallowing it?
Eventually, yeah.
Okay.
At first it was like, I was just swallowing the oxys, and then one of my buddies was like, you should try snorting it. And I was like, okay, because I had some experience with like cocaine too. So like, I kind of liked snorting things.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
in this weird way.
In the spirit of transparency, I've, in my younger years, I've done cocaine before too. And I mean, there's the thing about cocaine, and again, my target audience, they're in that age group where they're going to be experimenting. So I think it's important that they know and hear your story. But I just feel like with cocaine, it was like you were always, you're chasing the feeling the whole night after the first line or the first bump. Like you never get that same feeling again. So to me, it was always just like, I was like, why do I keep doing this? It's the same result every time. And rather than hanging out and socializing with my friends, I'm like thinking about like, when's the next time I can sneak off to the bathroom and do a bump, and it's just like, and then you feel like crap the next day too. So that was
the worst.
You feel horrible. You feel absolutely horrible. So I can relate to that. But so you were your buddy's like, you can snort it. And so you're like, all right, fine, I'll try it. Now, one question I have is through your 20s, right? So like there's this buildup, like it's in high school, it's like drinking for fun and it's, you're getting drunk and you're blacking out, but I'm sure you had to think everybody's doing it. This is normal. This is what my friend group is doing. This is what the popular kids are doing. And then you're into your 20s and you're drinking and then you're taking the Norcos and then the Oxys. At any point in this process, are you starting to think, hey, I know you said at first it sort of helped, so maybe you felt like, oh, wow, this is helping me. This is bringing me peace. And maybe you're getting to this, but was there a moment where you started to feel like maybe this is excessive, maybe other people aren't doing it this way, and maybe this isn't as frequent for other people as it is for me?
Yeah, I think it took a while for me to get there.
Okay.
Because my friends, like we all kind of did it. I was living with like two of my buddies. And so it was like, we were always doing it.
Yeah.
And so I think like, I had some times with like so then once like the oxys are kind of like next level.
Yep. And now you're snorting those, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm snorting them. And I think like the first time was like, that I really like kind of felt that was like that, what you're talking about. I was like sitting at the dining room table one night and it's like, I gotta work at like 7 a.m. the next day. And it's like almost midnight.
Yep.
And it's like my guy that I normally would get it from doesn't have them. And I'm like just calling everybody, like asking him for a guy, like asking anybody I know, that does them or knows somebody.
Yep.
Like kind of like frantically, and I think that was the first moment where it was like, whoa, like this.
Like I really need these. Like this is like something that like is consuming a lot of my brain space. Like,
yeah.
Were you another thing too is like, do you think that like your mind didn't go there because you had your life together to a certain extent? Like you had a successful fitness business, you were training people. I have to assume that you were in good shape at that time. So like, was there sort of like a justification factor where you were like, well, I get all my shit done, so like I'm fine?
Yeah, I think I was just kind of like blind to it, I think I noticed it and I was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy, but I hadn't really I didn't really understand it yet, like I think there was like some aspects of a physical withdrawal at that time. But I'd never really, felt that before. So I wasn't really sure like exactly what it was. Like, I wasn't sure if I was just like kind of being crazy. Um, but later on, I found that it's like, you get like physical and mental dependence on these things. But it was like kind of mild at that time. So I don't even know if I like kind of looked at it as of like, I need to justify this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just kind of like surprising to me, like how badly like I wanted to have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was kind of, the first time where I really noticed it, and so it kind of progressing, like, just snorting them. And then I started like smoking them. And like, that's when things started to kind of really like decline, where I'm like doing them all the time. And then, when you do a lot of oxys, like, I don't know if it's like an effect chemically from the substance or if it's like lack of sleep, but it's like you used to always know who did them because they'd have these, like, we would call it raccoon eyes.
Yeah.
These like black spots under your eyes, and so I started noticing, like, at work, clients would be like, are you okay?
Really? They
doing
would,
okay.
They would flat out ask you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was when it was like, okay, like now I have to like keep doing this and I have to hide it, and like have to be good because it started to eat into my life. So it's like, I stopped working out as much. I started canceling clients more, I wasn't working as much. And that's when kind of like the decline started.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it just, it was crazy. Like, kind of just work started going downhill, and then it's like that spiral effect of like, you're not doing as well at work, your friends don't like you as much. All these things are starting to decline. And so then you start to like, all those things that like this drug fixed, which was like feeling less than, feeling not good enough, like feeling guilty, feeling ashamed. All the things that the drug fixed is now, because you're doing it to excess, is creating these, it's creating these situations that, you get responses from people that make you feel that way.
Yeah.
And so then you start feeling even worse. And so it's like this spiral effect that you just get caught in of like, I messed up, so I'm going to like take this pill so that it doesn't matter and I don't have to feel it, I don't have to feel ashamed or guilty for messing up, and then hiding away from that makes you do another thing that you feel guilty about, that you want to hide from. And it's nonstop.
Yeah.
And I think like that cycle goes this way,
Yes.
pretty quickly, and everything starts to kind of like crumble around you. And then you start searching for, new things. And, it got pretty gnarly, like at the end. I managed to like get a promotion through all of this.
Through all of that, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet. And so I started working at this gym in Livermore, and I think at this point, like, I was living on my own, and then we like, the lease was under my name, and then we like kind of somewhat burnt the house down.
Okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Well, we used to, like, we all smoked cigarettes,
Yep.
And so we had this like planter box that was like hanging outside the kitchen window, and it just had like soil in it, and we would just like put our cigarettes out in there. And I woke up one morning and like somebody's outside my window screaming fire. And there's like, my window was open and it was just like smoke like all up in my room. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I run downstairs and my buddy Chris is like, got the hose out and he's like hosing out the fire on his own. And it's like the whole side of this kitchen
is on fire.
It's just like on fire.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just a mess. So there's like this whole investigation with the fire department and with the insurance company, and they kind of determined that like, I guess, fertilizer is like combustible or something,
Yeah.
And so, and like at this time, this is how like my thinking is like we had these neighbors who were actually like, it was like one of my good friend's cousins were our neighbors, but they hated us. Like they absolutely hated us because we were like, I don't really feel like we partied that much or we were that loud, but maybe I didn't really know. But we just like knew that they didn't like us. And so like in my head, I was like, no way a cigarette butt in this planter box can cause this thing to like catch on fire.
Yeah.
And so like I told myself in my head, I was like, our neighbor started the fire because they don't want us to live here.
Yeah.
That's just like the insanity, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was completely insane. And so, and then I moved in with like my ex-girlfriend's parents. And then I just a lot of like hopping around and like no stability. And I ended up like living with my sister for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was tough because when I was living with my sister, that was when I like realized that like I really, really, really have a problem. Like that's when those like physical withdrawals started to kick in. So it would be like, if I didn't have any pills for a little bit, like I'd get really sick, to the point of like just like complete body aches. I'm trying to like think of kind of the symptoms, but yeah, I don't know, just body aches, like
probably
kind
like,
of this like
sweating.
Weird, like sweating, like this weird like shaking feeling, like can't really sleep, just kind of like anxiety of the body.
Yeah.
And so I ended up telling my sister, that I had a problem. And, this was one of my first experiences of, when you have alcoholism, there's literally nobody that can help you.
Yeah.
Like nobody can help you stop, really, but yeah, like I did things where, I gave her my credit cards, and she was like helping me out with that. And then I would somehow find a way to like go to the bank, no ID, no bank card, and like somehow figure out how to get cash out of my account.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where it's like, I'm 27 years old. I'm renting a house for my sister, or I'm renting a room, for my sister.
Yep.
Living with her and her husband. And I'm climbing out the window at night, to go get pills.
Yep.
Which is like crazy. And, yeah, I don't know. It just kept going and kept going. And, eventually like I found myself, I think it was like one time I couldn't find anything. And, all these people had always talked about Hill Hill in San Francisco, which is Leavenworth Street in the Tenderloin. And so I went out there one time and, eventually like that process led into me smoking crack. And honestly, like to this day, like I'm grateful for crack because like when you start smoking crack, like oxys, it's like, okay, here you're kind of like slowly working your way down.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, when you start smoking crack, at least my experience, it's like, hey, you're here and then you're just like straight down.
Yeah. Nosedive.
Complete nosedive. you know, like once I started doing that, like after I got kicked out of my sister's house, I was living back with the same buddies that I had lived with before, but it was a place that they were leasing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Had your friend group fallen apart by this point in time, or do you is the crew still in on this together? Like, is everybody still participating?
Yeah. No, they were still doing it. I think they were kind of realizing like, I mean, I think there is some extent, like with oxys, it's such a strong like substance
Mm-hmm.
and like such a strong drug that I think it can grip people that like really aren't like alcoholics, you
Yeah.
know, and kind of
Yeah.
run their lives down. Um, you know, and it turned out to be the case for like a couple of my buddies were that way where they were able to stop and like not have to like go through the whole deal, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I think some of them started to recognize it, but it's like kind of nuts because yeah, they were like kind of still together and I kind of like isolated, but then I got kicked out of my sister's house, rightfully so. And then I ended up like moving in with them
Yep.
and staying with them for a while. And like the crazy thing is like these guys were like doing oxys and I got kicked out of their house. You
Really?
know? Yeah. Like that's how bad it was.
Were you,
It's
did
because
you
I would
bring,
like,
oh yeah, go for it.
I would like get home late, you know, and then I would just like drive to the city at like 11 o'clock at night, you know,
Yep.
and then, you know, I go down to the Tenderloin and it's like, who knows what's going to happen when you get there. And then I'm like, you know, smoking crack on like a Wednesday night. And then I'm coming home at like
Yep.
3:30 in the morning and like somebody locked the door because it's like, it's nighttime.
Yep.
And then I'm like banging on the door, trying to get in, sleeping in my car half the time because I can't get back into the place that I'm living in.
Yep.
So yeah, you know, like literally like I'm living in a house with people that are like using drugs, yet I am so much worse that like I get kicked out,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know? And so eventually I just said, screw it, you know? And I was like, I'm just going to the city. I'm going to the
Yep.
city. And, you know, I had like this guy that I was buying from and he lived at, the Artmar Hotel
Yeah.
in the Tenderloin. And it was like, I think it was like 25 or like $50 a day cash, you know, but people like live there,
Yeah.
you know? So I just kind of like, I didn't really have anything to pack up at this point. I think all my stuff was like in my grandma's garage or something because I've been hopping around so much.
Are you still training people at this point in time too, or is that
So that was like, I was, you know, but it was like, dude, I was like an assistant fitness manager, you know,
Yep.
and I'm obviously not performing at work, you know. I think at the time, what I didn't realize is like when you smoke crack, you're like, it's weird. Like as much as I felt like normal,
Yeah.
you know, I remember thinking to myself, like, why is that guy looking at me, you know,
Yep.
or like, what's this guy's problem?
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, when you smoke crack, it's like you act very strange.
Yeah.
And you're like super paranoid all the time, you know.
Yep.
So I was trying to make it all work and it wasn't working, you know. And so I basically told my boss at the time, I was like, dude, I got to take a leave of absence. You know, I made up some story about what was going on. And I basically just like drove out to the city.
Yep.
Started living, you know, at this motel. And that became my life, you know, like I would just sit in this motel, you know, and I would do oxys and I would smoke crack and I would chain smoke cigarettes and I would play like pointless games on my phone. And like, that was my life, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I enjoyed some of the like the craziness of it, you know, like when my guy didn't have anything, like kind of driving around, you know, and trying to find stuff.
Yep.
and just like getting into these like situations that are not ideal, of like letting guys that I don't know into my car,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
getting jacked,
They would
you
steal from
know.
you?
Oh yeah, well, like I was an idiot, dude. Like I would get to the point where it was like I needed it so bad or I wanted it so bad.
Yep.
Like I would let these guys into my car and they'd be like they're good, they're like kind of friend you up and sell you up, and then they're like, yeah, he's like my guy's like in this spot right here. I'm gonna go get it. Just wait in the car. And they take your cash, and then they're gone.
They're gone. Yep.
Yeah, but like in this weird way, like I enjoyed the process of like, I don't know, learning how it worked, like
Yeah.
learning how the system worked. It was like having situations that weren't successful made successful situations,
In the future.
more exciting,
Yeah.
so it was all kind of just like this game,
Mm.
and I really just didn't have any like, there was a couple situations that were like pretty sketchy. But I think like at this point it was like, dude, it's like I almost had like nothing to live for.
And did you feel that way at this point? Like that you had nothing to live for, or was
Yeah.
yeah.
Like not to the point, like I never thought to myself, like, I want to kill myself,
Yeah.
or like, I want my life to be over, or any of that, or anything like that. It was just like pure recklessness. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care what happens,
And you didn't care because every thought that was in your head was consumed by, how do I consume this substance? How do I get these substances? How do I like, was that just at this point, is that all that's running through your head 24/7?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like, get the stuff, do the stuff. The effects don't last as soon as I'm out. Like, how do I get my next fix?
Yep.
And I think a big part of it too was like, dude, I just like, I guess like kind of that spiral that I was talking about of like making mistakes and then hiding from the feelings, and then making mistakes and then hiding from the feelings, doing things I shouldn't be doing, hiding from the feelings. Like it brought me to a place that it was just me. And there was,
Yeah. There was no
it was
one left.
me, and it was drugs, and that was it.
Yeah.
And my mom, like, at this point, my sister had like completely disowned me, but my mom was always trying to like get in touch with me and all this stuff. But I was like too ashamed to even
To pick up
like,
the phone.
yeah, to even steer,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of just written it off. So it's like essentially like I had just ripped everything out of my life.
Yeah.
Except for drugs. Drugs took the place of everything. So I didn't care what happened, like there was times where it was like I would, I'd be smoking crack, and then there was one time I remember, and it was like I felt like the whole like right side of my body was numb, and I like looked at my hand, and it was like my fingers were swollen.
Yeah.
And like the right side of my face was numb, and like my face looked like droopy and swollen. And like honestly, to this day, like I don't know if that was just like my head, or if it was like something was actually happening.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself, like, dude, if I continue to smoke or do drugs tonight, like I might not make it,
Yep. Yep.
And whether that was true or not, like I still did it. Like I didn't really care.
You didn't stop. Yeah. You were still like, I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of like, that was pretty close to like kind of my first like bottom that I hit for sure. And then, yeah, I don't know like exactly like, what the moment was or what the time was, but I just, I had, I think during this, in between all of this, I had an intervention with my family, and they sent me to this place, Cherry Hill in San Leandro. And it's this like free, like detox rehab place, and you got like 15 pads on the floor, and like the shitters in the same room.
Yeah.
Like, it was gnarly, and you get like, I mean, it's basically like glorified jail. Like,
Yeah.
you get like, PB&J for breakfast and a cup of noodles for lunch. And that was like my first, I guess, like second experience with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember they had some guys come in and put on a meeting. I didn't really care, but I remember reading, they had copies of the book, of the big book, what we call it, the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember reading Bill's story in the very beginning, and that was the first time where I was like I have a problem, and I relate to this story. Like, this story sounds, like me. I think like the part for me was like, in this story, he's talking about, going to like not drinking for a little bit, and then on this sales call, right? And going to this location and stopping at this same diner that he stops at every time. And then he goes to this diner one time, and he sits down and he orders the same sandwich, and he orders a glass of milk like he always does. And then he thinks to himself one day out of the blue, like, oh, I'm just going to have some whiskey with this milk, and because I ate a sandwich, like it's not going to be a problem, because I'm going to be drinking on a full stomach.
Yep.
So then he has one shot of whiskey in the milk and he drinks it, and then once he has one, he's like, well, why don't I have another one? And so he just keeps having another one. And then before he knows it, he's drunk, and he's like, how did I get here? This is nuts. And I guess like what I really related to with that is just like the insanity of it all, and just like kind of the, in the big book, it talks about not being able to remember like the demoralization that we put ourselves through, like a month ago, or even a week ago, or even a day ago, and that's what I really related to, was like, I could do something so reckless and like make such a huge mistake and know that it's a result of a substance. And then the next day, and say, I'm never going to do that again. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I can't believe that I did that. And then the next day, go back and do it. Really be able to explain like why I did it. And so anyways, I had this relation to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I kind of felt like for the first time, okay.
All right, y'all. We were having a few technical difficulties, but we are all good. We're jumping back into the episode, and Robert, you were talking. I mean, I've been captivated this entire time. You've sort of, it feels like if we're not there yet, we're very close to reaching the bottom here as you're spiraling out, and you are starting your experience with AA.
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of what I was getting at is, I've kind of reached this point of like, okay, this is like this first bottom that I hit. And I think I just wanted to like backtrack a little bit, because I had this, through all of the experiences that I've kind of mentioned, I had, my family put me through like an intervention. And they basically said, this was like before I got kicked out of my sister's house. And they were like, you know, we need you to go to treatment if you want to continue to stay here. And I went to this place, Cherry Hill in San Leandro. And, you know, it's basically like this, it's kind of like glorified jail. You know, you got 2 rooms, one for women, one for men. And there's like, you know, 15 pads on the floor, and it's like the bathrooms in there, you know, and like breakfast, you're getting, you know, peanut butter and jelly, and you're getting, you know, a cup of noodles for lunch. And you kind of start there, and you're there for a few days, and then you kind of graduate to this, you know, other facility that they have, which is like a little bit nicer, you know, like your pad is raised up off the ground.
There you go.
At the second phase, you know, and the food's a little bit better. And it was like my second experience with Alcoholics Anonymous, and this group came in and they, you know, put on this meeting. And I remember like in the meeting that we had, you know, I didn't really want to be there. You know, I was just doing it because I didn't want to get kicked out of the house. But they dropped off some books, some big books of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was in the room. And like, at the time, like it was a struggle because I was basically doing like a non-medical detox. So I was basically going through like all of the symptoms of withdrawal without any type of medical assistance. And it was funny because I was rooming with this guy, and he was like, you know, he had been addicted to heroin, and he was like on methadone.
Yeah.
They had like prescribed him methadone. So this guy's just like out here, like chilling, like nodding off. And I'm like basically trying to sleep like Tasmanian devil, like spinning around all night.
Yep.
But you know, I started to get like a little bit of physical, you know, clarity, I guess. And like started to feel a little bit better. And so one day I like decided to open this book and read it, because it was like, I mean, we were just sitting in the room all day. And, so I opened the book and I started reading this story, and in this story, you know, it was kind of like, I remember reading this story and it kind of like starting to make sense for me. And it basically, you know, it talks about this guy, and he's going to, you know, he'd been sober for a little bit, had a problem with alcohol, got sober. And he did sales, and he would like make this drive, you know, this sales drive like pretty frequently. And he would stop at this same like diner on the side of the road. He'd always get a sandwich and a glass of milk. And so he goes there one day and, you know, goes in, orders a sandwich, orders a glass of milk, and then just kind of like out of the blue thinks to himself like, oh, you know, I'm eating a sandwich, so I'm going to have a full stomach, you know, I'm going to order another glass of milk because it was good. And I'm going to get some whiskey, and I'm going to put the whiskey in the milk. And because I'm drinking on a full stomach, nothing's going to happen. Everything's going to be fine. So he puts the whiskey in the milk and he drinks the milk, you know, and then he thinks to himself, well, that wasn't so bad, so I'm going to do it again. So he just continues to, you know, order whiskeys, put it in the milk, drink the milk, you know, and then eventually he finds himself and he's like, okay, now I'm drunk, you know, and like, how did I get here? And I guess like, I think kind of to get back to where we were was just like that insanity, you know, feeling that insanity, and reading this story to me sounded absolutely insane. You know, I was like, why does this guy think that, you know, if he's an alcoholic, all of a sudden it's just going to be fine if he, you know, drinks a little bit of whiskey in his milk, you know? And it just kind of like clicked for me. It was like, that's the same insanity that I have, you know? And I remember thinking like, starting to like believe a little bit that like, okay, A, I have a problem. And then B, there's other people that have the same problem that I do. You know? And like kind of the rest of the story kind of, you know, goes over like kind of his recovery, you know, and I wasn't really ready for that part at the time. I think all I took away from it was like, okay, I have this problem that's been recognized, and like other people have this problem, you know? So having like, you know, there's been little parts of my life where like AA has come in and made an impact on me, whether or not I was ready, you know? And then I think like that impact that it had made, you know, revisits itself in my life at a certain point when I'm in a place to receive it.
Yeah.
Right. And like to apply it to my life. So, you know, I think I'm at the bottom of this spiral. I don't care about anything, dude. I'm completely reckless. Like everything has just been, I have ripped everything from my life. You know, I was like, I wish I could pop up a picture of like where I was, because I have a picture like of this time, and it's nuts.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. But I was like 120 pounds, you know, I was sleeping once like every 4 days. You know, I would go for like 72 hours, and then I would pass out for like 18 hours.
Yep.
And then I would wake up like crawling, you know, trying to get to the drugs, because I was like, that's how quick I was doing it so much that's how quick the like symptoms would come in. So it's just like, dude, I know I have a problem. You know, I think I recognized initially that like I was kind of screwed, and I was like dependent on substances that first time I had asked my sister to help me out, you know? And then when I went to that first free detox, and then kind of reading the book a little bit and like getting some awareness of my problem, you know, it was like, I knew I had the problem, and it was like getting to the bottom of that spiral. It was like, okay, now I have to do something about it, you know? Yeah. And I think for like, maybe like a couple weeks, I'd been thinking about like trying to get, you know, into a rehab facility. And so I called, you know, I was like calling all over the place, and like, I didn't really have any money left, and I didn't have insurance. So I was like calling all these places, and like a lot of the free places are like booked up, you know, at this time, at least. And so I like couldn't get a bed anywhere free. And then I was like Googling, and I called, you know, this place down in Lake Arrowhead, and it like looked nice, you know, all the redwoods. And I was like, yeah, I'll get back to nature or whatever. It's just funny. Like
just thinking about it,
looking back, like as if it matters, this, you know, the surroundings or the scenery, you know, when I'm trying to, you know, turn my life around or whatever. But I'm like, yeah, this place looks nice, you know, like as if I deserve like luxury in my recovery.
Right.
And so I called this place, and I was like, yeah, how much is it? And they're like $30,000 a month. And I'm like, yeah, well, it ain't going to work, you know? And so I hang up the phone, and then I get a phone call from this like random guy, and he like somehow knows like everything about me, you know? And he's basically like, yeah, I can get you into treatment, you know, for free. And I can get you into this place that you called. And I was like, okay, you know, and I'm like, I don't trust this guy, you know, but I'll see what he says. And so he's basically like, he's like, here's how it's going to work. It was like during like when Obamacare was getting rolled out.
Yep.
And there was like certain qualifying events to be able to get approved for, you know, medical coverage. And so he basically has me like sign this lease that I was like staying at his sober living in Arizona, you know, so that he could get me health insurance. And then he paid for the health insurance and paid for the flight to come down to Southern California and go to treatment. And like, long story short, this was like kind of a byproduct of like some super shady stuff that was like happening in, you know, treatment and in rehab for a while, you know, but I'm grateful for it because it got
it got you in.
It got me in, you know? So I ended up, you know, going to treatment here, for 30 days. And, I went 30 days and it was a good experience, you know, and I actually like met some people that I'm still friends with today. Some of my really close buddies, which is pretty cool. And then I ended up going home after, and it's like, they kind of recommend that you don't, you know, and they kind of recommend that you stay where you're at and like go to sober living for a while. But like, I had convinced myself, like, I don't really need to do that.
Right.
You know, like I got this handled, but also like, you know, the whole time, at least like the last couple of weeks I'm in rehab, you know, my car's in my grandma's garage. And so I don't know if this is too graphic for your
go for
podcast
it, man.
or whatever, but yeah, basically like, you know, when you smoke crack, it's like, you know, you smoke it out of a glass pipe and then you have this like metal that kind of keeps it in place. And then you kind of end up pushing this metal piece back and forth. Because there's this like residue of it. And so I had this like nail, like cuticle trimmer thing, pusher thing, you know, that I would use on it.
Yep.
And like, yeah, the insanity is like, dude, during rehab, it's like, I know I have this thing with some residue on it in my car.
Yep.
In my grandma's garage, you know? So it's like, I go home, my mom picks me up in my car, and we go to my work to get a paycheck. You know, somehow I still like have my job.
Yeah.
At this 24. And so we go pick up the paycheck, and then there's like this Mexican restaurant right there. And my mom's like, do you want to get lunch? I was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I'm going to go grab a pack of smokes and then I'll come back over. So I literally like get this thing out of the center console. This is the day I got back from treatment.
Yep.
Get this thing out of the center console, you know, kind of like scrape it off, put it into the tip of a cigarette, and I smoke it, you know? Yep. And then I sit down with my mother for lunch. And that was one of the worst experiences of my life, for sure. Like, not only am I like kind of paranoid, you know, like I didn't really get that high, but I basically just like smoked crack, and I'm sitting down for lunch with my mom, who's been with me through this whole process and been extremely supportive in like the amount of like pain, you know, worry, all the things I'd put my mom through. And then like, now I'm going to do this, you know? Yeah, that was,
I can feel that. I can feel that, because I can just imagine, man, just like you've been on a roller coaster ride and your mom has been like the one constant when everybody's sort of like, I mean, I don't want to say turn their back, but they felt that they needed to create distance from you. And here she is, and you get out of the 30 days and that pull is still, and I get it. It's tough. And so the pull pulls you in just a little bit with what you have left of the, do you call it resin? Is that what it's called? Resin?
This would be like, that is a thing, but this would be just like residue.
Yeah. And it just pulls you in, and now you're sitting across from your mom at lunch, and you just were you just like riddled with guilt too, like just feeling horrible that you sort of snuck out and did this thing and your mom was waiting for you inside of the restaurant type of situation?
Yeah, I think like for sure a ton of guilt, you know.
So what happened next?
I don't know. I tried to just play it cool, like everything was fine, you know. She probably knew. Like, my mom's like pretty intuitive, you know, and like pretty in touch with her feelings and other people's feelings. So she probably knew. And then I'm like in my head, does she know? Does she not know?
Mm-hmm.
Also just like everything that she's done. And then like, I literally just do this right in front of her face, like, and that's the insanity, right? Like
Yeah.
I literally cannot, in that moment, I have no thought or recollection of what just happened 30 days ago.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm like continuing to use drugs, even when I think I might die. Complete recklessness, no care for myself or other people, no money, no insurance, like basically no job because I'm on a, leave of absence. And like really just like nothing to live for 30 days prior. And then this happens, and just have no recollection of it almost in the moment.
It's like the shot of whiskey in the milk.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing, and I think that's why it clicked for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I related to it so much. So I ended up going to a sober living, and then I got drug tested and failed. So I had to go back to Cherry Hill, that same spot. And I had to stay there for 3 days. And I just did I just smoked before lunch with my mom and that was it.
Yeah.
And so I'm in this place, in this detox, and I'm pretty much completely sober.
Yeah.
Just the worst, and ended up getting into this like sober living. And I think I went for like 30 days, without drinking or using drugs. And I was like going to meetings, but I just wasn't ready yet. And so, before I knew it, I was like, doing drugs in the backyard of the sober living and just going back to the like hiding. I think there was like a Thanksgiving in there somewhere where I was like super high for, and that was like an extremely uncomfortable experience.
Mm.
And so, then it's like, okay, now I have a lot more AA in me because in this 30 days, we did a lot of groups and a lot of therapy and like a lot of like yoga and like a lot of like learning about myself and learning about my disease, and then going to meetings, 2 to 3 nights a week. And kind of feeling like at home, in those meetings at that point when I was in rehab.
Mm.
And learning more about my disease and learning more about alcoholism and all that stuff. And so, like they kind of have this saying in AA of like, a belly full of booze and a head full of AA don't mix very well, But I just like after this Thanksgiving, I think it was literally after dinner, and I had been using, and I was just like, I don't know how I had money. I think at one point I had like taken a loan out of my like 401k,
Mm-hmm.
but I was basically just like, I'm just going back to the city, and I'm just going to like, at this point, it's like, I know where I've been there. So it's like, I know where I go.
Yep.
I know I have this disorder. I know I have this disease. I know I don't have any control over it, but like, screw it. I'm going to go do it for 30 days anyways.
Yeah.
So I literally just had this thought in my head of like, I'm just going to go do this for a month and then I'm going to go back to treatment.
Yep.
And so that's exactly what I did, and I just got straight back into it. I don't remember if I made it the full 30 days or not. I just got back down to the same place that I was before. I ended up coming down to treatment again. And, second time in treatment, I think I was like a little bit more ready. I really liked the program that I was at. And I think like one really cool thing is that, so this like second program that I went to, it was like you had a little bit more freedom. Like everything wasn't as structured, like it wasn't as like strict inpatient.
Yeah.
But it also like didn't push AA as hard as the other one. And so I was kind of like, there was one night where I like looked up meetings and I was like, I found this meeting and it was like close to where I was staying. And I had no idea like my way around this area. And I ended up walking to this meeting and it turned out to be the same one that we had been going to in the previous rehab, you know, that one where I had like kind of felt at home when I was at it. And it was cool to like go there, and I like ran into some of the guys that I went to treatment with the first time. And, you know, there was like a lot of old timers in this meeting and a lot of guys with a lot of time. And it was like, I walked in and I felt like I was like in the place where I was supposed to be, you know, and it was like really shocking to me that like nobody was like, I mean, I think a couple people made a couple jokes, you know, but like for the most part, like nobody was like said anything.
Yeah.
To the extent of like, oh, like you went back out, like you're a piece of shit, you know, or whatever. It was like, I just felt welcomed.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like nobody was going to beat me up for my mistake that I made. You know, and I think like, and the reason is because all those people have had probably a similar experience.
Yeah.
So I think that was like one of the first times in my life where I like, you know, made a big mistake and then came back and was like, didn't feel like, you know, I got like punished for it or, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that, like, I don't want that to get confused of like, I felt like, you know, my parents did that or anything like that, but I would do that to myself, you know?
Yeah.
I've always been like really hard on myself. So I think to be like shown some grace, like returning to the rooms and like to still be accepted was like a really cool experience.
Yeah.
So I ended up, you know, with this treatment, I ended up just sticking around, you know, and unfortunately, you know, my story doesn't end there.
Yeah.
You know, I ended up moving into a place and just renting out a room once I got out of treatment. And then the first night I was there, because I lived with a bunch of people that, you know, weren't sober. They were like, let's go out. And we went to Wild Goose, which funny enough is like a stone's throw over here.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Yeah. And we're all sitting at the table and, you know, everybody orders a drink and it gets to me and I'm just like, yeah, I'll take an IPA, you know? And it's just like that same thing, dude. Just like, can't remember what got me to where I am in the first place, you know? And so I had a drink and then I started drinking every weekend, you know, and I'm like down here, I have no money. I'm like still on a leave of absence at 24 and I'm like trying to apply at the one at Triangle Square.
Yeah.
But I can't because I'm on this leave of absence and I can't get off this leave of absence unless I have this doctor back in Northern California sign off on something. And so my sponsor at the time set me up with this guy for a job. And it was like right down the street from my house. And I'm like sanding, this guy did like custom Harley parts and paint jobs.
Yeah.
And I learned quite a bit. Like I never knew how many different types of sandpaper and sanding there is, you know, there's like wet sanding, dry sanding, but I'm basically just like grinding on these Harley parts all day. And when I met the guy, he's like, you know, how much do you make an hour? And I was like, yeah, like $40 to $50. And he kind of just laughs at me. And he's like, I'll pay you $5 an hour cash. You know, and in my head, I'm like, who's this guy? Like,
think he is.
Who does he think he is? And does he know who I am?
Yes.
You know? Doesn't he know who I am?
Yep.
And like in this point in my life, it's like, I just got out of rehab.
Yep.
I have nothing. And I'm like, literally, that's the ego coming out of like, doesn't this guy know who I am?
Yep.
I make $40 an hour or whatever, you know? And so I'm like sanding these Harley parts for $5 an hour. And I'm trying to like get enough money to like book a flight to go back and like kind of start the process of like trying to get my job back. And all the while I'm like going out and drinking every weekend. Like it's not a big deal, you know? Yep. I had a friend down in Oceanside that I'd never actually like been down to visit. And like one weekend I tried to, I was like, cause I had been drinking, you know, and I was like, I told him, I was like, hey, I need to get down there and, you know, just get away from this for a second so I can try to like get back to being sober. And so I rode my mountain bike all the way down to Oceanside, which is like impressive. A crazy experience. Yeah, it was gnarly,
very
dude.
Impressive.
Like with a backpack full with like stuff for the weekend, and it was like super sketchy, like riding down like PCH through Laguna.
Yes.
But like, dude, I just like needed to get out of town, you know, and like the bike trail on the 5 was like closed off. So I had to go through Pendleton, and the guy's like, you need a helmet. And I was like, I just rode like 35 miles.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I think it was like 45 miles. I have 15 to go.
Yeah.
I was like, can you give me a break? And he's like, I'll let you go through, but if you get stopped, they're going to make you come back out this gate, you know? And so I remember like pumping through Pendleton, and I'm like looking over my shoulder, and I'm like, it was crazy. And then I get down there, we go to Buffalo Wild Wings and have a beer.
Yep.
You know, like it's just nuts.
Yep.
So yeah, you know, and then one night I was out at the Wayfair. I was like playing pool. I was out with my roommate, and then him and this girl he was seeing left, and I was just playing pool with this guy. And it's like, you know, by now it's like I've kind of been around the block a few times. I'm like, okay, this guy's doing blow for sure.
Yep.
So I asked him about it, and we're like doing lines in the bathroom, and then I ended up going back, you know, to his apartment with like him and his girlfriend. He had a bunch of people over, and I'm just like, new to Southern California, like I don't have anything really to my name, nothing to show for it for my life, you know? And I'm like, basically just like bum and blow off this guy. And I'm like at this party that I don't know anybody, and I'm like super uncomfortable. And then I'm like doing blow. So I'm also like super paranoid.
Yep.
And so I end up leaving, and I wake up the next morning, and it's like what we talked about before, like, dude, the cocaine hangover is the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, it is horrible. So I wake up and I'm like feeling that. I pull up my phone, and it's like Google searches up, and it's like how to find crack in Costa Mesa. And I'm just like, dude, I can't do this anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And like I had been taking like dirty chips this whole time at AA. So then there's that whole like, you know, guilt behind all of that. And it's interesting because it's like that bottom, you know, like where I was at, like physically was not as bad as like what got me into treatment the 2 times, you know? Right. But I think it was just like finally a moment of like surrender, you know? Like I had tried so many things over the years of like, I'm going to try to do this to stop. You know, I'm going to try to have my sister help me stop. I'm going to go to rehab and I'm going to stop, you know. I tried everything, you know, and then I got out of rehab and I was like, well, I can probably just drink, you know, because it was primarily like drugs that were my problem.
Yep.
And then obviously that didn't work, you know, like that led me very quickly, like probably in less than 2 weeks, to a point of like, okay, if I drink, I'm going to do blow. And if I do blow, I'm going to smoke crack. And if I smoke crack, I'm probably going to die. So
yeah,
it was finally a point where it was just like, okay, I have been so stubborn and been trying to do this thing the way that I want to do it this entire time. And like, I am finally ready to surrender and just try not to like control things. And I'm going to try to do things a different way. because I just couldn't do it anymore, and it wasn't working, and I was out of ideas,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was April 12th, 2015. And that was, that was the last time I've used any sort of, alcohol or drug. So yeah, it's been, and everything from that moment, my life has only gotten better, and, that's why I kind of like when I was talking about before, like, dude, I'm super grateful for crack,
Yeah.
Dude, I'm grateful for that. Like, I'm grateful that dropped me off a cliff, dude, to, my initial bottom that I needed, and I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had. Like, I'm grateful for this story, and it's why I'm not like, I don't think a ton of business owners would hop on here.
Yeah.
Talk about all this stuff, and I might have to run it by my business partners potentially. But I'm not ashamed of it, like I've made a lot of mistakes, dude, but I'm not ashamed of it, like all of those experiences, even though in the moment, definitely negative, and I've hurt a lot of people, and it's my journey, like it's what I needed, in order to grow.
Yeah.
And probably needed a little bit more than most people, but, I'm grateful for the experience, man, because, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. So yeah, I mean, I guess kind of, we can kind of like switch into solution.
Yeah. I want to just say, man, I love so many aspects of the story, which I guess saying that sounds funny, but I appreciated the story, especially because I think that like it was non-linear. There was some moments, it was obviously you were going up and then you were down and then up, down, up, down. And then there were moments where you looked like you had done the 30 days and you were out, and then you relapsed, and then you did it again, but this time it had like chipped away a little bit more. And I think that that's really relatable, because I don't think that I know many people who just in their life alone, it's just been sort of linear and sort of at this like smooth upward path. But especially with like substance abuse, I think that there's like a lot of society sort of expects people like pull your shit together, like just go to this rehab, you'll be fine, and then your life will be changed forever. And it doesn't work like that. Like there's such a strong pull that, and there's so many pitfalls in so many ways. Like you talk about the insanity, like so many ways that your brain tricks you into doing something like, oh, it's okay. Like you can you can have one IPA with your friends out. Like it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you were drinking the booze, like the booze was fine. It's just, we got to make sure we don't do the crack and the oxys, and you'll be good. And then that leads to, IPAs and some blow with a guy playing pool. And then that leads to, so it's like, it isn't just this clear cut path to get to a place in your life where you've quote unquote overcome everything and there's no more challenges. And I think that that's important for people to hear, because I think that there are a lot of people that struggle with substance abuse or love somebody who struggles with substance abuse. And it can be really discouraging, I'm sure, if there is a relapse or you're not perfect in the process, but that doesn't mean to give up on it. And I think the other thing I liked about your story is like, it was this slow opening up to the idea that something needed to change. And that takes time, like everybody doesn't just have this light bulb moment that just boom, goes off. Sometimes it's like the dimmer switch. It's like the slow, and then it gets turned off a little bit, and then you turn it back on a little bit. And for you, that's sort of what this story represents to me, is like the slow opening up to the idea of like, this isn't how I'm supposed to live my life. I'm meant for more, and I'm ready to make that change. And so I just want to give you your kudos, man. I mean, that's over 7 years of sobriety after the journey you've been on. I mean, it's impressive. And
thank you.
Yeah, it's inspiring. So I guess this is when you're like, okay, I know this lie that I keep telling myself. I cannot keep doing this anymore. So I guess, what does the solution process start to look like? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess, well, the first thing was like, okay, taking responsibility for that, because I had mentioned that I was like taking the dirty chips.
Yep.
I mean, I kind of finagled a way to find out that like, if I just stay, because you get like a 30-day chip.
Yep.
When you have less than 30 days, or like a newcomer chip. And so I was just taking the newcomer chips.
Yep.
And then I was like, maybe my sponsor won't remember when it's past 30 days.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yep.
But the first thing was like, yeah, just coming clean, like with my sponsor, and just letting them know like, hey, I've been drinking, and I use some drugs, and I'm ready to stop doing that, and I think like that's something that like I never really did prior to AA.
Yeah.
Which was like take full responsibility for things. And I think it like kind of goes along with what we were talking about earlier of like, like the feeling less than, kind of like that same mentality, but slightly different, of just like, this happened, but I'm going to try to like come up with an excuse, or like somehow like bend this to make it like not my fault, or it's somebody else's problem, just never really had like the willingness to get uncomfortable and face things head on of like, hey, listen, I messed up. I don't have any excuses. How do I move forward from here? Or how do we move forward from here?
Yeah. And I want to,
yeah, go for it.
Before we move on from that, I want to touch on that, and I don't want to get on my soapbox, but I think that what you're talking about is the first step of just like taking full responsibility. That is like, in my opinion, one of the cornerstones of just leading a successful life, period. And I have a whole chapter of this dedicated in my book, and that's why I want to just pause for a second to the person listening, whether this is you're finding your story in Robert, or you're struggling with mental health challenges similar to me, like responsibility is one of the first steps. And I remember for me, like, so I experienced the onset of a chronic brain disorder in 2016, and as these symptoms are unfolding, I'm experiencing severe anxiety, deep depression, and then I'm experiencing thoughts of suicide, and I'm struggling with my mental health, my brain health, and I'm thinking to myself, this is total bullshit. This is unfair. This is so-and-so's fault. This is this fault. Has nothing to do with me. I shouldn't have to deal with this challenge. Like, this shouldn't be something that I'm going through. I'm not that type of person. I'm not that guy. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like pushing the blame out on everybody else, every other thing, every other factor. And as a result of that, I wasn't taking my therapy and the things that I needed to do seriously to take care of my brain. And I was sort of avoiding and running away from it. And I distinctly remember, this was after getting diagnosed, had started a little bit of therapy, but hadn't stuck with it. I'm like sitting in my car outside of Cisco, the company, Cisco Systems, this is a company I used to work for. And I'm sitting in the car, getting ready to go into work. I'm more anxious, more depressed, and struggling with more thoughts of suicide than I have even before the diagnosis. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, something has to change. This why me mentality, like blaming it on everybody else, blaming it on everything else, has got me to this point where I'm not getting any better. In fact, I'm getting worse. And you talked about this earlier, is like, nobody else can get you sober. Nobody else can cure or help you recover from a chronic brain disorder diagnosis, no matter what it is. People can help you, but they can't do it for you. Mm-hmm. And so I just remember that distinct moment where I was like, I have to change the way that I'm thinking about this, and I have to take full responsibility. And I think sometimes, like, your back has to be up against the wall, similar to, I think, we have separate experiences, but our backs at some point were up against the wall. We've felt the lowest of lows where there has to become this component of responsibility over all of your actions, all of your decisions, everything that you do. And I just wanted to highlight that. I know that was a little soapboxy, but it's so important. I don't want to skip over that. Like, taking responsibility can be hard. It's not fun. It's so much easier to blame somebody else or blame the system or blame this thing or this person that did you wrong or whatever it might be. But ultimately, until you take full responsibility, it doesn't matter. You'll always stay stuck.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think your story and my story relate a lot in that way, for sure. And I do think that that's like, it is such an important thing, because if I don't know, if you can't take like ownership over it, I guess for me, it's like, dude, things happen and things are always going to happen,
Yeah.
Whether it's good things, bad things, like things are always going to happen in life. And like what AA has taught me is that like really all I need to worry about is how I react to those things, and so taking like responsibility for my actions and basically handling it the healthy way of, I recognize I did this, right? Or I recognize like I think ours are a little different in the sense of like, for me, it was like, I did all these things.
Yeah.
And I think for you, it was like, yes, this thing like kind of came on for you, right?
Yeah.
Like it did happen to you.
Yeah.
But also like, that's really inspiring too, because it was something that happened to you, but also it's still, you have to take ownership of it. Yes. Like, this is happening to me, and I can either continue to let it happen and give power to it by like saying it's not fair or like blaming other people for it or blaming society or whatever it is, or like I can own it and be like, I have XYZ. These are things that are real in my life that are going on. And like, here's what I can control to get better, Exactly. And so I think it's almost like more remarkable hearing that from you. And I appreciate you sharing it, because I think like, I don't know, if I look at like my experience, like I feel lucky sometimes,
Me too.
Like I feel lucky that I did all of this stuff. I did all the bad stuff. Like I feel lucky that I did that, I mean, luckily, like, dude, I didn't like physically harm anybody, like I got away with like not having to go to like my consequences were more with myself. Well, actually, that's not true.
For the most
I just feel like it wasn't like, I didn't feel like it was like terrible, but
yeah,
I'm glad that I did those things, because it got me to the point where I had to, to make a change. And it gave me the opportunity for the first time in my life to be like, this is the situation. I am 100% responsible for it.
Yep.
Right. And all I can do is take actions to make it better. You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I appreciate you. That's really cool to kind of like hear that perspective, and like kind of how it somewhat, it's like very similar, but it has like somewhat different. How do you see that? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like,
yes, because
it's harder because it happened to you, you know. I guess like in the same way, it's kind of similar because it's like, okay, so you have, you know, like you had that kind of come to you. Like, I guess in a way, like if I was to say that, like I have alcoholism,
exactly,
right? It could be like really similar, you know, which I like to recognize. I like to recognize alcoholism as a disease, but I also don't like to say that anything was okay that I did because of that. You know what I mean? Like ultimately at the end of the day, like my decisions were influenced, but I still had decisions.
Yes. And
you know what I mean?
Yes. And I love that we got to this because I agree with that exact thing. And that's the thing that I talk about in the book is like things can happen to you in life, whether it's genetic, whether it's some sort of action, whether it's some sort of person, things can happen to you in life that you didn't choose. And I get that. It sucks. Like there are things that happen to people. I mean, alcoholism runs in my family. I know people who can't sit down and have a social cocktail. I know that, and I know that it spirals quickly. And I'm sure that to them, and maybe you relate to this, that sucks. Like I just wish that I could sit down and have a social cocktail and be able to socialize and continue on with my life. Your genetics, the way that it was set up for you, that's just not the case. And that's more of like a broad you talking broadly, but obviously in your case as well, probably you can relate to that. You didn't choose that. I mean, that's just a part of your genetic makeup. Maybe nature nurture combination. I know we're still trying to figure that out fully, but you didn't choose that. Same for me. So we can be upset about something, but at a certain point, even if you didn't choose it, you still have to take responsibility over it. And I think that that's what you're talking about. And that's a huge part of my message because I see too many people caught up in the woe is me mentality. And what they don't realize is that while they think that mentality is serving them, it's just keeping them stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I've 100%. Seen it with, and I can say it from like I don't think I'm better than you because I was there. I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there. So I know that like it just keeps you stuck. And it's funny too, because you talk about all the different, like it was cool getting into your brain a little bit because there's all these little different thoughts that sort of just keep you coming back until you beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing for me, you know, all these different thoughts that if I fed into them just kept me stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that was a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
No, yeah. And I think like kind of the challenge of it, at least for a guy like me, was like, that mentality, I'm still trying to like really describe it, you know, but like I always beat myself up, you know, and I always felt less than, and I always felt like things weren't fair, you know? And so when it comes to like, dude, I'm so grateful for AA, and like, I'd love to kind of like dive in a little bit more too in a little bit, but just one thing kind of based off our conversation that kind of stuck out to me was like, in the past, it would be like, I make a mistake, and then it would be like, I say that I'm a piece of shit.
That's how it would go. That was how it would go in your head. Yeah.
And to me, it's like, I don't know if I thought that maybe I was like taking responsibility for it in that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Of like, I recognize that I suck. You know what I mean? Like I did this, I recognize that I suck.
Yep.
And it was like AA that taught me that like, that is selfishness. And like, that is almost in a way like deflecting blame.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying that like that happened because I suck and I'm a piece of shit. So I'm actually not like taking responsibility for it.
Yes.
I'm literally just saying I am less than, so I was not capable of not messing this up.
Can I ask you something? Because that's such an important distinction. And I've heard that from family members in my own life. Zach, I'm just an alcoholic. This is how I'll always be. I'm such a piece of shit. There's nothing I can do about it. I've literally heard that come out of, I'm not going to say who, but I've heard that come out of this individual's mouth when I was on a phone call with him. So, it is sort of deflecting the blame, right? There's nothing I can do about it. I'm helpless to this. What do you think contributed to the feelings of I'm a piece of shit? And from the beginning, though, because you said you always sort of had this mentality. What do you think? Because I think that might be important for people listening. Like the piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit, beat myself up mentality whenever I make a mistake, and the life isn't fair, this isn't fair. Was it always there just naturally? Did something happen? I guess, how did it get there to begin with?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have an answer for you.
That's okay.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think that, in sobriety, we talk about kind of like being like maladjusted to life, So again, I'll touch on, I believe that alcoholism is a disease, and I don't believe it is as to hide from it, but as recognition, right? That it's something that I have and there is a treatment for it.
Yep.
And surrendering to the treatment for it.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yes. I've heard that theme before, by the way. I've interviewed somebody else on the podcast. Her episode's going to drop soon. But she talks about surrender. She struggled with substance abuse as well, and surrendering to the idea that she didn't have all the answers was like, it was surrendering and then it was responsibility. Like that was her, like the first two that she talked about. And now you've said surrender now multiple times. So I feel like that's worth highlighting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's like surrender or like recognition of like powerlessness, right?
Yep.
Is super important. But yeah, what was I talking about?
And you know what? Let me say this too, as a quick distinction. Powerlessness in the sense of not that you're powerless to not learn how to cope with this, but powerless in the sense of, is it more powerless in the sense of like, I can sit down and have a couple IPAs and everything's going to be fine? What is the power? Help define that for my listeners.
Yeah, I think that it's really great that you brought that up. I guess it's like, for how it relates to my life is like powerless over like, and it can be more than just drugs and alcohol. And I've learned that throughout my sobriety, but like for sure I am powerless over any mind altering substances, and it kind of goes back to the story of like the whiskey and the milk, right?
Yep.
Or, my 3 relapses of I am completely powerless over this substance, right? Or any mind altering substance, right? Like basically like, if I don't recognize that I am powerless over it and I don't have any control, then I'll drink again.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Like if I don't believe that I have zero control when it comes to drugs and alcohol, like I'll drink again. I mean, the first step is like, powerless over alcohol and your life became unmanageable, and it's just like, a first step is really important. Like if you can't do it like a good first step, it's really, really hard to be successful, in recovery. And everything that I'm saying today, like, I know there's people out there that like, can get sober and potentially be an alcoholic and like stay sober.
Yeah.
That's just not the case for me. So I'm by no means saying that this is the only path to recovery or the only program that works.
Yep.
But it is for sure the only program that's worked for me. So I just want to make that clear too.
That's a great distinction. I appreciate that.
Because like, if anybody was to ask me for my advice, right? Or to anybody that was dealing with drug and alcohol addiction, I would 100% of the time always recommend AA.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That being said, like, it's not the only way, So
that's an important distinction. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if I did a good job explaining the powerlessness, but yeah, it's just essentially like, that is so important, and like, there were so many like situations in my life or hints or points of time, or I can't think of the right word, but it was displayed to me over and over again throughout my life that was true for me.
Yeah.
That powerlessness over this substance. And I think like I'm trying to wrap this together. I think the powerlessness like really comes into play with like,
we're trying to tie it back in, but I remember it was just like the big thing that you were going to say was, or that you were going to take it down the path of just like everything that AA had taught you. So I know that the powerlessness is a part of it. The responsibility is also a part of it. What else did AA teach you through that? Like, I guess through those two pillars.
Yeah. So, oh man, I am like blanking all of a sudden.
That's okay. I can't remember where we were initially going, and I'm like that sometimes, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for me is like, okay, Robert and Zach, thank you. I get it. I need to take responsibility and I need to fully surrender. What else? Like, okay, I've started that. I'm open to that. What do I do now? Is like what I would, if I were listening, is what I would be thinking about.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what I'll do is just kind of like talk about my experience, like, through kind of that first point, and then like kind of going through my sobriety, because the responsibility thing and the powerlessness thing are like somewhat out of order. Like the real like kind of responsibility stuff kind of comes in a little bit later in the steps. Like there's quite a few steps that come before that.
Okay.
Well, actually, I guess responsibility, if we want to stick with that term, would be kind of like fourth step. But anyways, yeah. So like, I just had to take responsibility for like, hey, I did this. I have to go tell my sponsor. It's going to be uncomfortable, right? My head's going to tell me all these things. Like he's going to fire me. He's going to think I'm the biggest, piece of shit. Yep. He's going to never want to talk to me again. He's not going to want to see me at the meeting. Like it's all that like crazy stuff that our head does. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation of like, I have to have this really difficult conversation. And like, in my experience, like 99% of the time, I have worked myself up so much about this conversation, whatever it is, in AA, family, business, relationships.
Yep.
99% of the time, the outcome is so much easier than what my head makes it to be.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I had to kind of deal with that discomfort of like, okay, I just need to tell him what's going on. And so I told him what's going on. And sure enough, you know, even though I thought the world was going to end, he was just like, yeah, he's like, okay. And he used to say, we do the next indicated step, which was like, I love that, you know, and it goes back to what we were talking about before of like that taking responsibility as opposed to like beating yourself up about it. That was like the hard distinction for me. It's like, how do I take responsibility without like feeling like a piece of shit?
Yeah.
And so I love that of the next indicated step.
Yeah.
You know,
what
like
does that mean?
Essentially, it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What happened
in the past.
I mean, it does in a sense, but like in this moment right now, it doesn't matter what happened. It's what do you do next? That matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like we have to own it, but it already happened. So we own it and that's it, because any other power that we give to that, now we're living in the past. Right. Yep. And like, I'm like, you know, for me, that's going to lead me to depression.
Yep.
Anything that's like, I'm ruminating about in the past.
Yep.
Right. And so in this moment, like, what's my next indicated step? Like, what's the next thing that I do? Right. So, yeah, I love that. So I just started, I basically was at a point where it's like, dude, I'm willing to do anything that this guy says.
Yep.
You know, like this guy has whatever it was at the time, 15, 20 years of sobriety, you know, and he was an older gentleman, you know, and he had kids and he had grandkids and, you know, he had a successful business. But what I really loved about that guy was that it was just like the aura, you know, that he had. Like you could tell that like he was happy. Yeah. You know, and not because of like the nice car that he drove, right? Or like where he lives or how much money he has. Like that man was at peace. Yes. You know, and what like that man was like, had a lot of love, you know? Yeah. And like cared for others. And you could just, I don't know, you could just like feel it when you talk to him. Yeah. You know? Yep. And that's why I chose him to be my sponsor, you know? And because I wanted that. I never felt that, you know, to be honest with you, like, I don't know if like how much before AA I really felt love. Yeah. You know, I don't know. I didn't feel a ton of peace. So I wanted that. So I just did whatever he said. You know, he's like, dude, go to these meetings. He's like, take this commitment, you know? So I did the coffee commitment, which is like the worst. It's like the most work, you know? Yeah. And, you know, I was taking commitments for a long time and I was like consistent with my program. And he just took me through the steps, you know? And I think like, you know, step 2 and 3 are like really important for me. And I think they're like the two that 2, 3, 6, and 7, I've always kind of like had a hard time with because they all involve like spirituality, which took time for me, you know, and like kind of in AA, they talk about, you know, there's, a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening. And so the way it's described in the book is that like a spiritual experience is, and you touched on it earlier, of like that aha moment of like, I don't know, I was driving to here to like go get some booze and then somebody got in an accident. Yes. And I wasn't able to go and it was like a God shot, you know, or something, you know. That's probably a bad example because that means that other people were getting harmed, but you know what I'm saying? Like, like something showed you directly that there is a greater being, higher purpose, higher power, you know, creator of the universe, whatever. And something happened specifically that made you think like, oh, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, or, whatever it may be.
Yep.
And then there's the spiritual awakening. And so the spiritual awakening is essentially like you grow closer to your higher power, right? Or you basically receive the spirituality as a result of doing the steps, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was like, that's my story, is that like, it took time, like with step 2 and 3, it's like making, willingness.
What's step 1?
Powerless over alcohol.
Powerless over alcohol. Okay.
Yeah, that your life has become unmanageable. And then step 2 is willingness to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. Step 3 is made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God because you understand Him. So I think the spirituality stuff was like hard for me at first because I grew up and I was raised Christian, which I enjoyed at the time. But I think like, and then like during my drug use, I kind of was like, how could there be a God? Look at my life, whereas realistically, like I did it all,
Yeah.
Like the God then was me, and that's why my life sucked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I made myself in control of everything, and that's why my life ended up where it was. So that's kind of interesting. So I kind of had this like resentment, towards religion or whatever. And then, I was in treatment one time, and this Moroccan guy that I was living with gave me like a copy of the Quran, and then I like explored Buddhism a little bit, and not like super intensely, but like, I guess my view on like religion is that there's so many,
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to be like, I feel like they contradict each other. Sometimes they don't. I kind of believe that like a lot of them like kind of preach the same concepts.
Yeah.
Like I honestly feel like, the Bible has a lot of like similarities to the Big Book. It's kind of like the principles of living. The reason I love the Big Book so much is because it's all suggestive. Like they don't tell you that you have to do anything.
Yes.
It's like, hey, we did this worked. You can try it if you want. And you may find some success with it. I love that, like, just kind of open, like, here's something you can try, see how it goes.
Me too.
Not like you have to do this. You can't do this because it's bad. Because I don't know, dude, people make mistakes. I found in my experience that if I tell somebody that they have to do something, it doesn't matter. In business, it's a little bit different, but it's like if you're talking to a friend and they're asking for advice and you're like, rather than saying like, hey, this might be good to try, right? Or here's a suggestion that I have for you, or would you like some of my advice, and just going straight to like, you need to do this.
Yes.
Like that never gets a good response.
No.
And it really doesn't ever fix anything.
Nope. It almost always creates defensiveness.
Yeah. 100%.
People don't like being told what to do. And I know that from myself.
Yeah. Me neither.
I do not like being told. If you tell me to do something, I'm probably you're going to meet some resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I love the suggestion. That's probably always been my biggest challenge with organized religion is sometimes it feels like it's a finger being pointed in your face of like, you have to do this, you have to do this. But
let's actually finish. Sorry.
In my journey with OCD and recovery, there was such a spiritual component that came along with it that I started to change my perspective on that. I also felt like the conductor of my life, and it was me pulling all the strings and controlling everything, and it was all my willpower. And since 2016, I've just realized that that's just not the case. Now, I don't know if I subscribe to any one religion. To your point, there are so many. But I think that generally speaking, there are so many concepts and ideas that are valuable from all of them. And I do see this like mysterious spirituality in the way that, I mean, I can see it in your own story. I can see it. I've seen it in mine since 2016, and how it was almost like life wanted me to go down a certain path, and I just needed to slow down and listen. And I hadn't been doing that up until 2016.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so cool how like there's so many similarities in our stories, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said the conductor of your life, because in the book, you know, it talks about the director of a play, you know, and wanting everything to be perfect all the time, and like how it doesn't work that way, you know? So many like similarities, you know? And I do want to say that like I don't have anything against like any religion whatsoever.
Same.
You know?
I want to say that too.
Yeah. Like I'm a big advocate of like people like having their own beliefs, you know,
me too,
with anything. Because like I said before, like, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous worked for me, it may not work for somebody else. Right.
Yep.
And everybody's different, you know? So, yeah, just wanted to say that too.
I appreciate that once again, because I agree with that too. I think that people should. There's all sorts of different paths in life that you can take, and if you're feeling at peace, if something brings you peace and joy and happiness, like who am I to think otherwise? So I agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. So where was I? Oh, so step 2 and 3, right?
Yep.
So it was kind of hard for me because I was, you know, I kind of developed, you know, this probably unjustified resentment against religion.
Yep.
And then I got kind of frustrated. Like my sponsor was like, you know, step 2 was kind of easy because it's like, okay, you just have to be willing, you know? So it was like, at that point, it was like, you know, we had reached that new bottom where it was like, I knew I couldn't control anything now, you know?
Yep.
And I felt that powerlessness. Like I tried everything I possibly could. And I guess that's a good way to describe it, was like, I did everything in my control to try to fix my drinking problem my way, and it never worked.
Yep.
You know? And so I needed to try something else. And so that's when I dove into the program. And so with like step 2, it was like that willingness became easy because I had that gift of desperation, right? I was at that point of like, I don't have any other options. Like this is my only option. And it's very similar to what you talked about with like the back against the wall.
Yep.
Earlier in our conversation. So like step 2 was like pretty easy. You know, 1 was easy. It was like my experiences showed me like, yeah, dude, you are powerless and your life is extremely unmanageable, which made it easy for me to be willing, you know, in step 2. And then step 3 was like made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, you know, or as I like to say, higher power, of your understanding, you know? And so that one became a little tougher, right? Like making that decision. And it was kind of just, you know, and I've learned in my sobriety, like at first it was like, oh, whoa, that's a big commitment. You know, like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yep.
You know, and I've kind of learned that that's like something that oftentimes like I have to do that on a daily basis. Like that is not like the first week of my sobriety, I was like, I'm going to turn my will over to my higher power and that's it. And we're done. I'm no longer in control, you know, take the wheel.
Yes.
Right. It just doesn't work like that. There's so much action that has to be done to solidify that standpoint.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So I kind of found that that's something that like I have to do daily, often, you know? And it's because of the way that I think, you know, and like with alcoholism, it's like, okay, so I have this disorder, this distorted thinking, right? And before I got sober, my solution was drugs and alcohol. That was my solution, right? To my distorted thinking.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't the drugs and the alcohol that were the problem. It was the way my head works, you know? And so I had to switch that solution from like, my solution was drugs and alcohol, and it worked until it didn't.
Yep.
And now it's like, my solution is, you know, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, you know, essentially like, you know, spirituality, you know, cleaning house and helping other guys. I hate how I lose my train of thought. Where was I right before that?
Well, one thing I'm curious about is you've touched on the first 3. I think there's 12. Is it 12? It's a 12 step.
12, yeah.
So what are the other 9?
So 4 is moral inventory.
Okay.
So you essentially make a list of all the people you've harmed. There's like a couple different categories that you go through. There's people you've harmed, resentments, sex conduct. I can't remember the 4th one right now.
Yeah.
And then step 5 is essentially you tell all of that to another person, which is typically your sponsor.
Yep.
Step 6, 6 and 7 are basically like, when you go through 4 and 5, you kind of look at like what your character defects are. So that's what I'm kind of talking about, like that thinking, right? That distorted thinking. So you like 6 and 7, you kind of look at like what those character defects are. And then you basically like turn them over to your higher power.
Yeah.
In 7.
And was your distorted thinking that like nothing's fair and I'm a piece of shit whenever a mistake happens? Was that a part of your distorted thinking, or what else was distorted?
Yeah, I think those 2 things. I think like I could touch on like character defects of like, you know, like selfishness.
Okay.
You know, like became a big one. What else? It's funny because I have a list in my car. It's pretty long.
of character defects.
Yeah, from like working with my sponsor. Yeah, and they change, you know, but like, yeah, I don't know. I guess the distorted thinking was that just like in some way everything was always about me.
Yeah.
You know, and like I always go to that example of like somebody achieving success and like not being able to be happy for them. Like literally the first thing my head goes to is like, man, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. Bringing it back to you.
Yep. Like that's, if you just think about that, that's nuts.
It's interesting. Like, yeah.
This person achieved something really great and it's like a friend or something. And it's like, my head goes to, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Like jealousy would be another character defect probably that I have.
Yeah.
I'm jealous and I suck.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
All because somebody achieved something great. And it's like, man, what a bummer. Like that, you know, like that's an opportunity to be like happy for somebody, you know, to celebrate a success.
And I'll tell you, so first off, I've seen that in myself, especially as a younger man. And I see that, I do think that there are people in the world that can, whether they want to admit it or maybe they're developing awareness around hearing this conversation, that have that exact same situation where everything comes back to them. And I remember I met a friend, he's one of my best friends now to this day, in Raleigh. And I remember anytime I would do something good, he would be like, wow, dude, that's freaking awesome. Like, that's sweet. Like, congratulations. Like, congrats on your promotion at work, or like, congratulations on like, because obviously Kate's my wife now, but we started dating back. We've been together for 8 years almost. And so like, wow, dude, that's awesome, man. Congratulations on dating her. And like, he was like so genuinely happy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of showed me, I've told him this before, like, that you can be happy for your guy friends or your friends in general, and it doesn't steal away like any successes or anything that you might accomplish in your life. And then so that I started doing that, and it just felt good. Like, anytime somebody in my life that I cared about would accomplish something, or even somebody I didn't know, I'd be like, good for them. Like, that's awesome. I can only imagine like how much effort and work that must have put in. And it felt good. And I read this in Jay Shetty's book. He was basically like, when you feel joy for somebody else, you double the amount of joy. Because when you allow yourself to feel joy for other people, as well as feel joy for when you succeed, you double your joy. Because you can be joyful and happy no matter what, whether it's somebody else in your life achieving something or doing something, as well as yourself. And I had already been sort of doing that, so reading that was more of like a validation. But I love that you bring that up, because I think it does help you live a happier life, generally speaking, when rather than it, because I know what the other mentality is like when somebody does something and you're like, ugh, like that should be me, or like, man, I wish I could do that. And it's just like heavy and it doesn't feel good. There's like this little twinge of like, not enoughness, you know, like I'm not enough. And I think a lot of people struggle with that on social media, because they see somebody else's life and they compare it to theirs and it's not enough. And you can train yourself, though. That's the cool thing about the brain, is that you can train yourself to feel joy for other people. Even if at first, and this is me,
weird at first.
It feels weird. That's what I was just going to say. It feels like you're faking it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question, like with your friend that would like, would say that to you.
Yeah.
Or that would like hype you up, like gas you up, and like say he was excited for you.
Yeah.
Were you ever in a headspace where you were like,
he's lying?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's no way this guy can be that happy for me. Why does he even care that much?
I was like, there's no way that he could feel this way. He doesn't mean it. And then I would think to myself that all people are inherently selfish and that they only care about themselves, and that he was just faking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in that too.
Yep.
It's crazy.
But it's so good that you're shining a light on that, because I think a lot of people feel that way. It can't be just you and I. That's why the title of my book is "You're Not Alone." It can't just be us.
Yeah.
But you double your joy when you start to feel happy for other people.
What do you think the percentages of mental responses on Instagram when people watch like a story or something that go into that category of like, man, I wish I was doing that, you know, or
pretty high.
I wish I could do that. Yeah.
Pretty high, man. Pretty high, because I don't think it's something that can be taught. I mean, that's what I love about the brain, is like, God, our brains, I mean, just to think about where you were at a decade ago to where you are now in your life, can think about where I was 8 years ago to where I'm at now in my life. Like, our brains are so beautiful. They can adapt and be taught things and change. But I just don't think a lot of people get taught that. And people hop on these apps mindlessly sometimes, you know, and you don't even know. You're just on there because it's a habit, right? You get a dopamine hit from it, whatever it is, and you don't even know why you're on the app, and you start blindly consuming content. Before you know it, you feel lesser than.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
It is.
Yeah, it's something I struggle with still. For sure.
Me too. It's
like
a daily
with my
thing.
therapist. Yeah. It's like we're constantly like, would you relate this to like CBT?
Oh yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy. Definitely.
Yeah, like challenging the negative thoughts.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
like a big one. You know, like we actually have this like joke, my therapist and I, of like, you know, her giving me assignments for that.
Yeah,
and then I call them suggestions.
Yeah, I like that. I like it.
Like,
yeah, because you're like, yeah,
it's something that I wish I was like more consistent with, though, for sure. You know, because man, it's like you give power to something and it blossoms. Like just in the way of like, if I give power to my negative thoughts, like yeah, dude, it's going to suck my joy away. Like I'm not going to be a happy person.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
But if I give power to positive thoughts, which is so hard, dude. Like when you're used to like beating yourself up,
mm-hmm.
Man, it takes so much consistency of like, okay,
it's a daily battle.
I don't feel worthy, for example. And it's like, okay, let's challenge that. Like what? Like, here's all the things, like whether you have to be like grateful for or all the strengths that you have, you know? And it just takes so much repetition to like get out of that. But it's like, if you give that power to, and I'm by far, like by all means, not a perfect example. And I still struggle with this all the time, but like in my experience, like if I give power to positive thoughts, you know, or happiness for other people, even if I feel like it's fake when I'm doing it, it becomes real.
Yes.
You know, and that joy, it is there and it is real, and that love is there and it is real, you know?
Yep.
It takes some consistency.
I've observed the same exact same thing is what you literally what just came out of your mouth. I've literally observed that with myself. It's a muscle. It's a muscle, but I personally think it has to be worked every single day for me. Mm-hmm. I've always struggled with low self-esteem, low self-worth. I do feel that I deserve good in life, so I don't know if there's a distinction in that. But being grounded in who I am and things like that, that's been a journey for me. And I think it's going to be an ongoing journey. And I love that you keep going back to this, like, I'm a work in progress. I adopted the I'm a work in progress mentality years ago, and it makes everything so much lighter. Like, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't pretend to. Like, this conversation is just two guys talking about their experiences. Mm-hmm. Somebody might get something from this that helps them. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But at least the intention was positive, that we were trying to help the world. And I say that too about the like daily effort, because I'll tell you, to use an example, like I've been on the road probably like once a week since like the college fall semester started, giving a speech a week at a university. And a couple weeks ago, I was in Pittsburgh getting ready to go give a speech. And I called Kate and I just tell her, like, I'm not doing enough. Like, I should be further along in this. Like, I should be doing more, blah, 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 blah. And I told her, I was like, I know that these are cognitive distortions. I know that I should be grateful for my situation, and that a younger Zach would literally prayed for these days. Mm-hmm. And that if somebody from the outside looking in that wanted to become a full-time speaker would be like, wow, look at what he's doing. Like, he literally makes a living off of this. And yet I have these cognitive distortions. And as a result of that, I am ungrateful, and I have all of these negative emotions swimming around in me when I'm literally living in the dream that I prayed for.
Yeah.
And so we talked through it, and it was so funny. But the next day, I woke up with intentionality, told myself that I was going to ground myself in gratitude for that day, which I try to do every single day. The day that I didn't, I had just forgotten to. I was in a rush, and I was so much more grateful. And I felt like I moved through the world with peace and love and gratitude and like just a different aura. But I give that example to say it is a daily thing for me. Literally every single day I have to work on it.
Yeah, totally. And I think that routine is so important too.
It is.
It's crazy. Like, yeah, I think I'm really similar, and I actually haven't been very good about like my morning routine lately.
Yeah.
But typically, like, dude, if I wake up in the morning and I pray, and if I meditate, and like if I hop on the gratitude list, that I have with some guys, or at least like write down 3 things I'm grateful for and then like plan my day, as opposed to getting out of bed, checking my phone for work,
Yep.
Checking Instagram, going straight for coffee. Like those 2 days look completely different.
Yes, they do, because I do.
Yeah.
I have a similar morning routine to the first one, but I do the other one sometimes too when I'm in a rush.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very different days.
Yeah. And then that's hard too, of like, because you could do B, right? So A would be like I did the routine that I wanted. B would be that I didn't. It's like you could do B and you could still have a good day.
Mm.
But the way my head works is like, if I do B and I've been in the routine, but then I do B, then I'm like, okay, well, I didn't like handle this morning,
Yep.
So it's automatically based off my experience going to be a bad day.
Yep.
But it's like, I have so many opportunities to just decide, like you can literally just decide, I'm going to have a good day today.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
No matter what happens today, because something's going to happen. Something happens every day. Yep. But no matter what happens today, like I'm going to make the best of today.
Yes.
Like you could just decide that. And then it's just like whether or not like you believe it, or you could just keep telling yourself that until it like becomes true, because there's that way of doing it too. I think very similar to like the CBT with like challenging the negative thoughts, right? And the cognitive distortions and replacing that with facts.
Yes.
It's so interesting how the brain works.
It is. And I'll tell you, I got off the phone with one of my buddies the other day he's really struggled in his life with depression. And as a result of that, I don't think he's achieved his goals. Now he's on that path. And I asked him, I said, what changed? And he said he just woke up one day and he was like, I told my girlfriend that I'm just going to stop believing the lies that I've been telling myself about myself for all of these years. And every single day, he's like, I just take it day by day. And every day I'm just going to wake up and I'm going to try to tell myself a new narrative and do my very best for that day. And he's been on that path now for a couple years, and it's just been incredible to see. But sometimes you got to get it highlighted, right? Like the distortions we're talking about is like, for people listening, like it's these negative belief systems and thoughts that we have that sometimes are just operating inside of us consciously or subconsciously, I guess. We're just not aware of these belief systems that are guiding all of our actions, and it can be detrimental to your life. And once you start to shine a light on them, you can challenge them, which is what you were talking about. And it sounds like that's been a huge part. Has that been a huge part of your recovery journey, as well as just like living a happier, more fulfilled life? Or how does that overlap?
Yeah, so I think like that's an interesting question, because it's kind of like, so it's like I go to AA, like I'm consistent with that, and I go to therapy. And it's like with therapy, I mean, they're just different philosophies.
Yep.
I feel like therapy is a little bit more accepting. I don't know if that's the right word. Like therapy is a little bit more like honor yourself, love yourself, whereas I think AA is a little bit more like, here's some suggestions to make your life better, and like take the action and then it will get better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I do think AA sometimes gets a bad stigma of like it causing people to like beat themselves up, or like through all of this like cleaning house and taking responsibility for actions and recognizing that you've made mistakes. I think sometimes it gets amplified to like, I'm a problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so it's kind of a balance. But I think with AA, like the reason I don't, and I've heard that from multiple people, and and my therapist is one of them. I mean, she's pretty open-minded too, but she does, like, sometimes she references both and helps them work together of like, I know this is kind of how you do it in AA, but I challenge you to do this, you know, or to try this. And so I've, heard this from people of like, okay, sometimes we get really negative about ourselves in AA. And I don't really agree, because I think it's like, and I think the biggest thing is like when it goes over resentment in AA, of like, you get in a situation. Let's say, let me see if I can paint a picture. Let's say a guy cuts me off, right?
Yep.
On the freeway, and I almost rear end him.
Yep.
And then I like honk at him, and then I pull up to the side of him, and I like give him the bird, and I'm like riding his ass, and then hopping in front of him, and then like, braking super hard and all this stuff. Right. And so I can look at this scenario of like, and like, dude, I could take that the rest of my day and be like super resentful about it.
Yeah.
And just like ruminate on the situation. And like what AA would teach us is like, okay, this guy cut me off and I almost got in an accident. Is that his fault? Yes, 100%. Right. But I have to like, if I was to like, let's say we pull over and we're about to like, get in a fight or something.
Yep.
Like AA would teach me to be like, hey, listen, I apologize for reacting the way I did here. Right. I take full responsibility for acting this way in this situation. Yeah. I should not have acted that way. I'll do my best not to act that way in the future. Let me know if there's anything I can do to make it right. Right. That's what AA teaches us. I don't say one thing about what that guy did to me.
Yeah.
Right. Even though initially, yes, it was his fault, whether he was oblivious or whatever, but that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like if I pull over and I'm like, hey man, I really don't appreciate you pulling me, like cut me off, like that's not going to help anything.
Right.
Like me and that guy are probably going to punch each other in the face now.
Yes.
And then it's like, what good does that do?
Exactly.
So I think sometimes it's like with AA, it's like in any situation, it's like clean your side of the street, right? What is my part in this scenario?
Wow. I love that.
And this can be with like people, places, things, and this stuff comes up all the time. And I think that sometimes like some people view that of like, okay, well, then am I just going to let people walk all over me for the rest of my life? You know? Like, am I constantly just going to be thinking about like what I was doing and the mistake that I made?
Yep.
But I think what it's really trying to say is like, it doesn't matter what they do because you cannot control it. You literally have no control.
Yes.
And when you're upset about what that person did, you're really just torturing yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like in my experience is like, if I handle this situation the way that I know I was supposed to, and like this being said, like, dude, I have a huge one in my life that's like really tough for me. Yeah. Like in terms of a resentment that I still 7 years later have, you know? So I am not perfect. But if I respond the way that like this program has taught me to respond, I will for sure always feel better. And likely whatever relationship that is, whatever situation that is, if I approach it and attack it that way, like it will get better. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, I think like, what was the question again?
It definitely does because, well, it answers the question because, I mean, that scenario you painted too, I mean, that's there are cognitive distortions inside of that example, and there are different ways to respond to that based on those thoughts. Because you could be having thoughts in your head of, how dare this person, blah, 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 they cut me off, this is all their fault, da, 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 I'm justified in my response. But what you're talking about is taking a second, pausing, taking responsibility over your response, not even getting hung up in the past or what's happened or shining a light on that. And I loved what you said about cleaning your side of the street and focusing on that. And again, just, I know we'll keep tying this back to our stories, but I just feel like every time I've stayed focused on cleaning my side of the street, which means just focusing on what I can control and relinquishing the need for control over other people, places, and things, like you said, my life has gone in a positive direction. I've been happier. I've been more at peace. And that involves also taking control over the willingness to look at your thoughts and examine them and challenge them. So I love that example about cleaning your side of the street and focusing on that. So let me ask you this, because I feel like this was sort of in my opinion, what ties everything together. You start going on your sobriety journey, and now you're the co-founder of a gym here in Orange County, very successful gym. Help tie it together for people. I mean, how much time did it take in the journey to get to this place, and how has purpose and this gym played a role in your day-to-day and where you're at now?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I think what I'm curious about is, how did you, I mean, the gym MOXI has got to be, I would think, a big part of your purpose now. Did you have something pulling at your heartstrings, driving you that direction? I know to tie it all together, because at the beginning of this interview, we know that fitness was your passion and that you were doing personal training. But in your recovery, like for me, this work that I do now is so meaningful for me in my recovery. I think it's a big reason why I've recovered to the level that I'm at. So I'm curious for you, how has getting sober and then starting MOXI been important for you?
Yeah, I think the process of getting sober and everything that I've learned along the way, it's interesting. So it's like, the way that like you relate, right? Like struggling with like mental illness, right? And then, me struggling with alcoholism.
Yep.
And it's like, in a way, the principles are the same, right? And so I feel the same way about fitness. I feel like the principles of fitness journeys are very similar to the principles of, the journey of an alcoholic in recovery, or probably a lot of other things. And so like what my experience gave me, was like experience to share with others.
Yeah.
And so like, and an ability to relate a situation that I have, or at least like apply the skills that I learned or the tools that I've had, apply those to like somebody who's having some sort of, issue with, physical fitness or with health or anything like that. And so what I found was that like, when I started training because I ended up getting a job at the Triangle Square here, and that's all thanks to this guy, Scott Melvin, who was my manager up in Livermore, and it turned out he had a brother who was, had a, issue with, I think, addiction. And so he understood. And so he kind of like gave me, kind of warned the people down here, but gave me a recommendation like, hey, if this guy can keep his stuff together, like he's extremely talented,
Yep.
So, that's another way AA, indirectly as, influenced my life. But I was able to like, fall in love with fitness again. And because I had definitely like just completely had gone away from it. And so I fell in love with fitness again. And I started to notice that like, I guess it's like this experience gave me like something to offer other people, and not that I take credit for it, but just like gratitude for the experience. And it was the first time in my life, when I was starting to apply tools that I'd learned through the experience of getting sober to people's fitness journeys. It was the first time in my life where I was like, I can actually help people.
Yeah.
And I was like comfortable saying that. And I was like confident enough with myself and who I was as a person to be able to say that. So I think my AirPods are dying. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We'll wrap it up. Make sure that the AirPods don't die on you.
Okay. So I think what I was going to say was like, I think that's kind of like a big thing that like AA gave me was like, and how it kind of differs from like the cognitive distortions and challenging those.
Yeah.
Is that it showed me like a pattern for living that like allowed me to do good in the world and like to do esteemable acts consistently to where I feel good enough about myself to be able to like meet other people, guide other people, share it with other people, relate to other people.
Yeah.
It gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me values, which I never had. It gave me a sense of identity, and like all of those things were like so important, especially with, with MOXI and like right before MOXI, and I had Body by Bobby, which was basically just not even a business. It's just like a logo,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were doing Zoom workouts, and it was basically just all my clients from 24 during the pandemic. And we just did body weight workouts, and we used towels for bicep curls, and we did challenges, and, it was really cool, and that was just me. And that was like the first time where it was like, whoa, like I can do something on my own.
Yeah.
And I think like, dude, I owe a lot of that to like, obviously like, dude, I owe a lot of that to my recovery, and I owe a lot of that to like, the fellowship of AA, like I've created so many friends and like so many like meaningful relationships with men in my life that like have guided me through everything. I think that that's one really great aspect about AA too, is that like, you're going to meet so many people, and you go through a situation, like you can call somebody and they can offer you advice.
Yeah.
And if they haven't gone through it, they know somebody's number that's gone through a very similar situation, and they can share their experience of like, hey, I battled with this struggle, but this is what I did, and it all worked out, whereas like in my head, I could be like, holy smokes, the world's going to end.
Yes.
So yeah, like a lot of people have like helped me, along this journey. And, but it was a time like during that, like during COVID and during that, it was like a time where it was like one of the first times where I was like, oh my gosh, like I found success in fitness, but then it was like, I was kind of on my own, and I was in a position where I had to like create, which I had never really done before. was like 24 had a model, and it's like you execute the model. And like,
Yep.
obviously, like you can do certain things within that. And I found some things that worked really well for me within that. But this was the first time where it was like, okay, there is nothing. Yet there's an opportunity, and now you need to create,
Yeah.
you know? And so I got to give a lot of credit to like my clients, like during that time for like, you know, sticking with me. The community of them, of like that client base was like, it was so cool, man. We were doing like park workouts, and we were doing the Zoom workouts, and a lot of people like knew each other, and like then we had the challenges, and we had like group text, and like everybody was into it, And so there's like a lot of great people, man, that have been brought into my life. So like all those clients that stuck with me, and then my business partner, Linda Werda, was like extremely helpful. I mean, she's always been, and that's a cool connection too, because I actually made the connection with Linda, through our mutual experiences,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much I'm at liberty to share, but like
Yeah.
I have, we have similar stories. And so we were able to like relate on that, and she invited me into her life, and I trained, the whole family, and we went on trips together, and it was like, it was a ton of fun. And we ran a marathon together, and she took me through the whole training. And I don't know, always been somebody that I can call when I need advice, and like somebody that I look up to. And and like during that time, she was like extremely supportive, and like, this is a woman who owns a business, that's extremely busy, and is like taking the time to like help me figure out what my challenges are going to be for like my Zoom workouts or like things like this,
Yeah.
And I think that she's like, and that's like, that's something that's really cool, is it's like she was brought into my life, and like her and Dave as well, her husband, like those two people have been like extremely like supportive and like valuable, like on my journey. And like, I owe a lot to those people, but it's like, it's like they were like put into my life. Like it was kind of like a weird situation, like how it all kind of, the connection was made.
Yeah.
And it's so cliche to say that like everything happens for a reason, but like, I really do feel like it's true. Like my experience is that like, no matter what happens, like I find myself freaking out about it in the moment. And then like 3 years later, looking back and being like, man, that sucked.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that that happened, because I learned X, Y, Z, and now I'm here. And this is like, and I'm where I wished I was going to be in 5 years ago,
Yep.
And so, yeah, this couple was, put into my life, and it just like, the family, they're just great, dude. They're amazing people. And it was like, we were doing, even before I was doing like the Zoom workouts, and, Linda used to talk about like, we were on this trip to Utah, and she's like looking at the ceiling. Cause I had told her that like, I wanted to, like when I got successful at 24, I was like, dude, I want to have my own gym one day. And it was kind of like a pipe dream, because it was like, dude, that's a lot to start a business. And like, I have no idea what to do, And we're like on this trip in Utah, and she's like looking at the ceiling at this restaurant, and she was like, we should have that ceiling in your gym. And I was like, all right, let's do it,
Yeah.
And then I think she brought it up to me one other time, because I hadn't mentioned it in a while. And she was like, hey, like, are you ready to do this? And I was like, and I wasn't really ready to do it, And then again, like things happening, right? And then COVID happened, and then Body by Bobby happened. And then it was like, then I had some like confidence. I'm like, dude, I can actually like create things. Like I can make something out of nothing. and I have the people in my life to do that. And like, I have a community that's like super strong and super solid. And like, these people are amazing, you know, and it's like, I can do this. And so it's like all these things like happened, you know, to like get me to a point where it was like, you know, then we had this whole idea about, you know, I was kind of talking with Dave and Linda about starting my own gym, you know, during COVID, you know, because I did pretty well during COVID actually. And then they were kind of like in talks with my business partner, Matt, you know, about doing a spin thing. And so then they were kind of like separate, right? And we're kind of like talking about it. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have been ready to like pull trigger on my own thing anyways. And so, you know, it all kind of gets blended into this one idea, like we should have a gym with spin and group training.
Yeah.
And then, you know, my head went to, okay, then I gotta be business partners with this guy I don't know. We're looking at a 10,000 square foot facility, you know? And I'm like, I immediately start freaking out. And I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know.
Yeah. Seems like a big investment.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if I can do that, you know? You know, and we went and looked at the space, and I can be a pretty like critical person, you know, sometimes. And so I'm like, I'm looking at the space and I'm like focusing on the negatives about it or whatever. I was just scared, man. I was just like really scared, you know? And so we went on this trip. I went on this trip with Dave and Linda. I forget where we went. I think we went to Utah. And it was like coming up to the point, you know, where we were about to sign the lease. And I think there was, you know, some part of it where it was like, you know, we were kind of like signing this lease deal, but I wasn't really like in on the negotiations. And so, and I'm the type of guy that likes to be in control, you know, kind of like we talked about.
Oh yeah.
And I think kind of like there was a level of like ego involved of like, am I going to be able to like, you know, share this business with 5 other people?
Yep.
You know, and be able to do things the way that I want to do things. And so I had all these like, you know, hesitations. And so we went on this trip to Utah, and it's getting close to where like, you know, Matt's about to sign a deal for the place. And, you know, we get back and Linda's like, and I, you know, in my head, I was like, I'm not going to, like, I can't. It's too much. And a lot of it, like, Zach, is cool because a lot of it, I think, was like underlying, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Underlying, I'm going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of fear masked with this situation isn't right for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like my mind playing a trick on itself of like, of course, dude, there were concerns, and there was like, you know, healthy fears too, but like it was all just me not feeling like I could be successful when it really came down to the time of like taking a chance, making a decision.
Yep.
And so we get back from this trip, and she's like, yeah, she's like, you're going to do it? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, dude, like, because we had grown really close, you know. And she's like mom to me, you know, like she's like my Southern California mom. And I think she just said like, I really think you should do this, you know. She's like, I really just think like, I understand you're scared, but like, I really don't want you to look back on this and regret it.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, I just really like, I really want you to be involved, you know, and like kind of basically like just told me, she's like, you're going to do it.
Yep.
which I don't really like being told what to do, but so honestly, like kind of against how I was feeling, I was like, all right, I'm in, kind of just in the same way of like, kind of with AA of like taking my hands off the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, okay, I'm not in charge, guide me. Because when I'm driving the car, it goes off the cliffs and into walls and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it was the same thing here where it was almost like, whatever you want to call it, the creator of the universe or karma or whatever happened or whatever you want to call it, put me in a situation where this person was just like, just do it, And I was just like, all right, I'm just going to let it ride, man, and just see what happens. And like, I'm just going to allow this to happen. And oh God, because it's been literally, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I mean, it's a really, MOXI is a really special place. And honestly, like, dude, my journey of battling drugs and alcohol to Alcoholics Anonymous, like all the pieces fit together all the way through to the start of MOXI, like I never struggled with sobriety, for example. Like I would have never met Linda and Dave, if I never met them, there wouldn't ever be a MOXI, because they would have never, there could have been a MOXI. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because it's not all about me, but, probably not. MOXI is MOXI because of, everybody involved. It's MOXI because of, Dave and Linda, and it's MOXI because of Jacqueline and Matt and myself and Blake. And, it's a lot of partners, and it's a little wild sometimes with so many people. But I think that's what makes it so special, because there are so many people, and it's like there are so many different experiences between us, and like all of us have our strengths, and our expertises and all that stuff. And I really do think like kind of just everything that everybody's experienced and been through, and all of the struggles and, overcoming obstacles and skill sets, and it just makes it kind of crazy, but like really great. And it's just like, it's a huge part of like, what MOXI is. So, and it's based on that community, it really is. Like, that's why, like, sometimes, like, dude, I feel like we can't really take a ton of credit for it, Like, I think we're doing something really good for the community in terms of like having like a really great place to work out where like people feel safe and anybody is welcome, But a huge part of what drives people to MOXI is the people that are at MOXI, This is our members.
Yeah.
And can you take credit for that? Like, I don't know. I'm sure like, a lot of those people were like drawn there because of, ownership and because of staff. But like a lot of it is kind of just like fate, everything that we talked about of just like everything just kind of coming together. And so it's grown into this like beautiful business, man, and it's like really great place to hang out, and tons of potential and like so many different like things to offer, whether it be, recovery or personal training, group fitness, cycle classes. We've created a new class type in shred, something that we believe we haven't seen before, and yoga and breath work, and man, it's cool. It's cool to be able to do all those things and have it busy all the time. I don't know, man. It's just like, yeah.
It is cool. It is cool. And I've got to partake in a lot of those different classes. So I can attest to it that it's, you got a special thing going on over there. And you've got such an interesting story, man. And it does. All the pieces feel like they fit together perfectly. in terms of leading you to where you're at in your life now, and the culmination of all of your life experiences and the highs, the lows, everything in between, and being able to inject those experiences into a business that then gets to serve a community. And I can feel that there's a heart, there's a beating heart inside of MOXI, and I think that's a huge testament to you and obviously the rest of the team. But I haven't interviewed any of them. I've only talked to you. But it's just a cool story, man, and I really appreciate you being willing to come on and share that, because like we were saying earlier, life isn't linear, and I think that your story serves as inspiration for others, that you can be quite literally at the lowest you could possibly be in your life and make a decision, make a change. Other people can help you along the way, and all these years later, you're pursuing your passions, and you're the owner of a fitness company that's doing really, really well here in Orange County. And so I just want to say kudos to you. And before we jump off, just want to give you the floor to tell people how they can stay connected with you. How they can find you.
How they can find me?
Yeah, find you, stay connected if your story inspired them.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, I don't know, thanks for the opportunity.
Of course.
And then, I don't know, I always enjoy like opportunities to just share my experience in hopes that it can help other people, you know, and it really does like a lot more for me than people think, you know, and we talk about it in AA a lot, like with sponsorship, like when you sponsor somebody and help take them to the steps, like it's extremely beneficial to you as well, you know. Yes. Probably more beneficial to the sponsor than it is to the sponsee at times. So it's something that I'm passionate about for sure. But yeah, I mean, you can always pop by MOXI, 126 Rochester Street in Costa Mesa. You can find me on Instagram. It's at MOXI Bobby _ in between. And yeah.
Awesome.
Anybody, wants to reach out, or love to hear from anybody. So
perfect. Well, Robert, I appreciate your time so much, man. Thank you for coming on the You're Not Alone podcast and giving my audience a little bit of your time. So can't thank you enough, and really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.